We're ready to go.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome everyone. Today is the Thursday, October 12th, 2023 meeting of the Colorado State Land Board. We are going to begin this morning with one of our commissioners online, Josie Heath, and one who is currently offline. Maybe there's a potential of her getting online. She's having some serious technical difficulties. So with that, let's call the meeting to order. Director Ryan, if you want to do a roll call.
Commissioner Chavez. Here. Commissioner Scanlon.
Here.
Commissioner Heath.
Here.
Commissioner Heath's online. So we have 3 of our 5 commissioners today.
Wonderful. All right, we can move. We do not, correct, have an executive session.
That's correct.
So let's go ahead and move to open public comment for any non-agenda items. So anything that is not listed on today's agenda, we would be welcome to open those lines. And I do have someone in person.
Please.
Come on up. Come on up. And I, for the commissioner's notes, we did receive some public comment online that will be entered into the record as well. Please come on up, introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks. Good morning, Commissioner.
Morning.
I'm pleased to be here, and thank you very much for letting me come and speak to you this morning. My name is MJ Kajee, and I drove from Telluride to talk to you this morning about an extraordinary property that you have in your trust portfolio. And I thank you for allowing me to speak about it. I think I need to tell you a little about myself. I have notes because at 80 plus, sometimes you need notes. So I'm a retired cattle rancher, and I bought a 1,400 acre ranch in Redvale, Colorado in 1972. So I've been here a long time. I moved here in about 1975, and I ran 143 head of mother cows by myself and a border collie. And I irrigated with a shovel and tarps. You'll understand what that means. And I hayed about 300 or 400 acres of the 1,400 and ran my cows. I did everything myself except the stacking, which I never could get the hang of. So I started out with just the shovel and the tarps, and then when I ended up, I had gated pipes and a couple of sidewalks. And I did this by myself. I also ran the cows by myself. Whenever I had to have help, I had friends who also liked to ride, and they helped me gather and brand and vaccinate and that stuff. In 1986, I bought 250 acres on Wilson Mesa that adjoins your school section, on the school section north side, and be on the south side. I wonder if any of you have had a chance, or all of you have had a chance to visit the Wilson Mesa school section. I brought a picture just in case. Or picture. This is looking. This is looking toward my property, and this is looking south towards the mountains. It's, as you can see, it's an extraordinary, if you can, really an extraordinary piece of property. And I'm so glad you have it. Well, when I hit my 75th birthday, I realized that I couldn't do all the stuff. So I told my quasi stepson, and I said, Jeff, if you want to be a rancher, now's your chance. It's yours. So he came, and I showed him around for a little bit, and he had irrigated before for his dad and whatever. So he knew what the story was. And I moved up to Wilson Mesa, where I have a one-room cabin with a sleeping loft that's attached to a drive-through garage and a 5-stall barn. That's where I lived. And the cows were up there in summer, winter, summer, pardon me, spring, summer, and fall. And I had, at that time, the lease on the Wilson Mesa school section. I had that for 36 or 37 years. And your manager at the time, Kit Page, was always very nice. He came and visited every year. And he was pleased with the way that I handled it and ran my cows and was careful with it. And I know that you know all this because it's an extraordinary property. And you put it on your back cover of your annual report in 1917-18. So you know how special this place is. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I just want to emphasize that. It's also on the first page of your, let's see, fall 2018 report on stewarding land, the trust for generations. It's on the first page here, right below your So, in 1996, when the constitutional amendment took place, it set up, as you know, I'm just saying this for 300,000 acres of special, very special land, part of your 2.8 million acres of land, to be in the special category for various reasons, among them beauty, wildlife, special plants, and whatever. And certainly the Wilson Mesa School section qualified on a number of these things, and the county and the DOW, I guess now Parks and Wildlife, and I nominated the school section for the trust, and it went into the trust in 1998. So it's a very, very small part of your portfolio. I know that I think I did 0.02% of your 300,000 acres, but it has an importance that really far, far outweighs its small size. And that's what I'm here to talk about. It's in a critical migration corridor for literally thousands of elk and deer. And I know that you know that this is important also to Governor Polis there because of the reports that have been done in 2019, 2020, and 21 about the importance of properties like these and the corridors for these animals. The large landowners, and I'm really not a large landowner, large landowners on Wilson Mesa have put their properties into conservation easements. Surprisingly, the first one to do that, I think, was Hollywood director named Oliver Stone, who put his 1,000-acre plus ranch into this. His property abuts mine and the school system. When he sold his ranch to a guy named Lyle Berman, who is a casino owner and owns with like Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, Lyle added 700 or 800 more acres to this, also in a conservation easement. And the place on the other side, which was almost 2,000 acres, Sound of Music. They have conservation easements on their property too. I'm just saying this because these people who came from other places, I mean, we understand exactly how important these things are. But people who came from other places to Colorado, they understood too. And it's, I think, a large part why people come to Colorado is for the beauty, animals, for the lifestyle. So anyway, I'm here to say that the Wilson Mesa school section is directly in this migration map. I have the maps from the Department of Natural Resources that show all this. A couple of years ago, Ron Rivoli, who was your at the time the Southwest District Manager, called and said he was coming up the next day and you're going to build a fence. And I said, I'll see you there. So he came up and I was surprised because I had heard nothing about the fence. And so I said, if I'd known, I would have been happy to do my share. It's a boundary fence, and that's a normal thing that we do, is you pay your half of the fence. But I didn't know about it. So he said, no, well, it was just going to be done. And the fence builder arrived, and I said to him, what kind of a fence are you building? And he said, 4-strand barbed wire. And I said, that will be the only barbed wire fence on this entire mesa. Everybody else has wildlife friendly fences. And I said, well, this is it. I said, but look, you have some rolls of this high tensile fence on his truck. I said, what would it cost to do that? Could you do that? He said, yeah, we could do that. So I asked Ron, and Ron said, same price. So we went ahead and did that. Has 2 barbed wires, one up 16 inches. It has the smooth wires, high tensile wires in the middle, and it's friendly to these thousands of deer and elk that come up and back every year. So it was very important to me that that got done, and I thank them for doing that. I just wanted to tell you that this is a unique property in your portfolio. I know that it was for sale for $11 million, which seems like a lot of money for 640 acres. But this property is so special that I think we all know that land doesn't usually go down in value when it is a particularly special piece of property, especially. So I know that Mr. Riley hopes that the broker would, and I think you said you asked the listing broker, Bill Fandel, to target the property to a single buyer, high net worth individual. Who was interested in building his home and maybe a compound, and was likely to keep the property intact. And I agree, that would be wonderful. But I understand that your fiduciary responsibility is to sell it to the highest bidder. And we don't know, and we can't predict really who that is going to spend $11 million for 640 acres, and what is he going to do? So, I mean, I remember the earlier hope that it could be used as a glamping site, and when I talked to the owner of the glamping thing, he said, I said, how many landing sites would you like to put on this? I see you're starting on 40. He said, well, 70. And I said, 70 year round? Oh, yes. So I thought that's interesting because when they filmed a movie called The Hateful Eight up there, they were pulling people out of ditches. There's only one road that goes around. It loops around this property, starts on Fall Creek, goes up around the properties and comes down closer to Telluride on the other side. But that's the only road. And it's a dirt road, no, gravel road. And absolutely terrible condition. But anyway, so I know and I understand that the purpose of these school sections originally, when they were set up, when Colorado became a state, was to raise money for the school system. And I think it was a wonderful idea. And I think that you've done a wonderful job doing that. It's contributed to the school system greatly. I know that. And I know that you try to increase the revenue. But in 1996, when I and others, I don't know, 700,000 Coloradans voted for Amendment 16, it slightly changed the focus of your mission and gave you the opportunity not just to look at how much money you could raise or generate every year. I think it was there. And I'm just looking at your material here. It was dual responsibilities to generate reasonable, consistent income over time. And the second new one was to protect and enhance the natural values of the state trust land. It's an intergenerational responsibility. It's not just this year's children and the school section. It's forever, and I think that's important. I think that I'm asking you. It's my favorite place in the world. Excuse me. And I'm asking you to honor the generations and generations of school children to come who will also benefit from your responsibilities and your work here. And I know you all volunteers, and I think that's great. But it's 640 acres that is so special out of the 300,000 acres that you have in this special category of stewardship trust, that I'm asking you to reconsider selling this now. It's not going to be worth less later. We all know that, unless there's some sort of emergency where you need $11 million or whatever you're going to get for it. Please take a second look at this. Please come and visit if you haven't seen it. I know you've seen it.
I have.
Many times. So I just am asking you to do that. This is in your booklet here, in this one. This is from Kit Page, district manager for the southwestern region of the state. That's the area where I'm in. He was the gentleman who came and checked on me every year. Grazing leases are a huge part of land stewardship for us. Grazing improves the land over time if you do it right. Apparently I did, thank you. We expect leases to maintain the long-term quality of trust lands because our agency needs to earn money not only for today's students, but also for future generations of children. And I think also under this new kind of mission that you're allowed to have, children could come and see all the things that I'm talking about. That's part of that. It could be used for that. I know that doesn't generate money, but I think that's important too. I really do try my very best I tried my very best. And I never asked the skill section of the land board for money for weed control. I maintained the road, which had been there since 1920 or before. And when Tri-State, the large power company, came and needed to put a circuit between Telluride and Nuclear so that they would have more reliable power, they came across Wilson Mesa. The people on top of Wilson Mesa, the school section is just one little bench below that, fought them and had them bury this line, which was, I understand, more than $1 million because they have to put the line in oil, in an oil pipe to keep the temperature down. So I knew from the topography here, see, they came from, here. They came from up here, there are the towers, down this hill, and then this is the access road here, along here. So I hired an attorney. I said, look, I will cooperate with you if you put it where I think it ought to go. We'll talk to the engineer about this. And they agreed rather than to litigate. So I talked to the engineer, we tried and tried, and lo and behold, instead of putting it where they originally intended to put it, which was here, right across your state school section, coming off the hill here, like this, they brought it down into the canyon and down below and around, so that I think it really kept the value of your property up and intact. I think that would have had a really deleterious effect on it. Thank you for listening to me. I'd like to just read you one thing here that it's a Denver Law Review, that just the conclusion to this. It's a Denver Law Review article by an attorney named Charles Bedford. Some of you may know him. That's 28 pages long, but the conclusion is short, and I'm just Amendment 16 is a fascinating departure from previous land board management schemes. It has given the land board the opportunity to value stewardship, the environment, and educational opportunities on a par with their requirement to generate revenues. It anticipates moving to another level of land management where the health of the land and public input are strong players in decisions. Isolated approaches rooted in stubborn adherence to strict fiduciary principles should be rejected in favor of collaborative, cooperative processes. A delicate balance among divergent interests may be achieved through heightened local input into the management process. These approaches stand a greater chance of returning benefits, current income, as well as natural resource and educational values to the trust beneficiaries by avoiding costly and counterproductive snarls of litigation and political. The eyes of the board's beneficiaries, the legislature, local government leases the people of Colorado, not to mention the other states' land boards and other public land managers throughout the West, are on the state board land as its are watching the state board land as it implements Amendment 16 and manages Colorado State Trust lands in the 21st century. He put it much better than I could, and that's why I wanted to read that. So please come and look at it, see what it really means. And oh, here, I actually brought some photos. May I?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do I? Thanks.
And we'll get those to the commissioners who are not in
Yes,
person.
exactly. Thank you.
Are these for us to keep?
Beg
Are they
pardon?
for us to keep?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
So I just it's an extraordinary piece of land, and it deserves special consideration. And that's, I'm not telling you how to do your jobs, of course. I'm just asking you to look at it, give it a second look and a chance to be around for the generations and generations. It's critically important. And that's why I've come to tell you I need to ask you. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear my long spiel.
I want to start with saying thank you for taking the time to drive here, or however you got here. It's a long journey, and we appreciate you doing that and being with us this morning. As you know, we're engaged in active litigation, so we can't really comment terribly deeply on this particular topic.
I didn't ask, I didn't mention litigation.
Yeah.
That's not why I'm here.
No, I appreciate that. That's just the advice we've been given, but I want to express my deep understanding of your passion for this property and your ownership and caretaking of it these many years. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Stanley, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thank you so much.
Well, and safe travels. Apparently it's a little bliffy in the mountains.
Yeah, but a lot of construction.
Okay.
And accidents coming this way.
Oh my goodness.
People are praised.
I'll do take that there.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Ms.
So,
Chen.
thank you very much.
Appreciate meeting you.
Thank you.
Nick, with that, do we have other public comment online?
Folks listening online, if you'll use that raise hand feature, you're welcome to address the commissioners on items that are not on our agenda for the day. Wait a few seconds. No raised hands, Commissioner.
With that, we'll move on. Announcements, Director Ryan.
No announcements from me.
Okay. We're next to the DNR report. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Heath.
Yes,
This-
good morning.
Chime in. It's a little hard to see your tiny box on the screen.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question regarding public comment. On the public comments that were in our packet, is this the time to make a comment about those? I guess I would like to,
Yeah.
It's on several of them, there are questions that are asked. For example, on Paul Mason's comment about how the leases are done, I think he asked an important question. And I wanted also to ask to the question regarding whether or not the current lessee had an opportunity to match the offering on Chico Basin. So I'm wondering if staff could just respond about whether or not they've already responded to those questions.
Yes.
Oh,
Kristen wanted to respond since
Come,
I'm not sure. I know
Kristen's coming forward, and we're referring to public comment we received online.
Good morning, Kristen, for the record. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is our online public comment form invites the public to share comments and questions with us. And additionally, it invites the public to indicate if they would like their comment or question shared with commissioners. Regardless, staff responds and answers these inquiries. But if the person has indicated that they want their comment or question shared with commissioners, we always do so in the packet. Or in the day before announcement.
And we're going to have further discussion on this. This will be on our agenda next month. So I expect we'll also be talking through some of these same questions then.
Okay.
And I just want to make that clear for the public too, that will be a topic of discussion for the commissioners.
We're talking about Chico Basin.
Yeah.
Commissioner Heath. Yes. We probably should have made that. I should have said this in the announcements earlier. Subsequent to publishing the board package, which had Chico Basin Ranch being reviewed by the board as a matter on the board leasing agenda. After we published this, the Phillips family asked for a request for review. And so that pulls it off of the board leasing agenda. You'll vote on that, but and moves the matter to the November agenda where all of the parties will come before you. And it will be its own full-blown agenda item. And I apologize. I realized last night that we had amended our board package, posted public notices. We had informed everyone but the 5 commissioners of what we were doing. So I apologize. We think we made that clear to the public. We've certainly notified all the impacted parties on the matter, and we've set aside 2 hours on the November agenda for all of the parties to come and discuss Chico Basin Ranch in full detail. So I apologize. We didn't tell you that before.
Yeah. That sort of explains the sequence.
Thank you. And that really, answers my question regarding Chico Basin. But on the first public comment regarding leasing, would it be possible to share at some point with the commissioners the response to the questions that Paul Mason asked regarding our leasing in terms of renewable energy? That was the first public comment in our packet, or not in our packet, but in the public responses to the land board agenda.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. And that'll be at some subsequent meeting?
How about in the next month's staff report?
Sounds good. All right, because it raises some important questions about the leasing agenda, and that would be, I think, of interest to all the commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Commissioner Heath. Okay, DNR. Our DNR report.
Tim's online.
Online, okay.
All right. Thank you, Chair Scanlon. I'm glad to connect with you all virtually to give a quick update from DNR. The full staff from the Executive Director's Office are currently gathered for a strategic planning retreat where we're actively working to identify key priorities, which we hope will advance the management of natural resources in the state in the coming years. We hope to come out of this with greater direction and coordination around proactive opportunities. But for now, I wanted to provide a couple of quick updates from the DNR team. One quick staffing update. Hope Dalton will be starting as the director of the Colorado Produced Water Consortium on September 25th. Hope comes to DNR with extensive experience in both state and local government. As for budget and legislative items, we are still waiting for governor's office approval on most of our department bills and our budget requests, and we'll be sure to provide additional information on both as we're able. We did receive approval to run a Wolverine reintroduction bill. However, the specifics of this bill are contingent upon U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service listing decision, which we expect in November, barring another government shutdown. ECMC, DNR recently provided testimony to in support of Colorado Parks and Wildlife's updated high priority habitat maps, which were formally adopted by ECMC Commission on October 6th. These updated maps include important additions that will help direct and guide future oil and gas development away from some of the most sensitive habitats. The map habitat data can also help inform a wide variety of other land use decisions. This update is a product of Senate Bill 181, which overhauled how oil, gas, and carbon is managed in the state. ECMC has also begun meeting with stakeholders to inform the development of a regulatory framework to govern deep geothermal projects for electricity production. ECMC is accepting public comment on a conceptual framework for those rules. Additionally, ECMC will be developing a regulatory framework for carbon capture on storage projects, and they will begin stakeholding for that process very soon. A few updates from the Colorado Water Conservation Board. As you all know, we updated Colorado's water plan this year, and the plan provides a framework for helping Colorado meet its water challenges through collaborative action around water development, water conservation. It's been updated to consider the impact of climate change on our future water supply and plan for future population growth and water needs. A key component of implementing the plan is our water plan grants. Through the Colorado Water Conservation Board, recently the board passed $7.8 million in funding, which will help transform urban water use, restore watersheds, and reinvigorate agriculture across the state. These critical grants are going to local and regional efforts across Colorado. Additionally, the Colorado River and its status has been in the news, and deservedly so. Our downstream reservoirs, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, continue to lose water and capacity due to overuse in our changing climate. Meanwhile, the lower basin states of the Colorado River continue to overuse their water allocations, while we in the upper basin continue to live within the means that we always have. A few Colorado State Forest Service updates. The Colorado State Wildlife Action Plan, or COSWAP, is now a permanent state program. In 2023, the Workforce Development Grant is currently open for applications, and you can work with the Conservation Corps and the Department of Corrections, SWIFT crews, to add mitigation training. COSWAP supported 2 projects in 2021 round of funding, both in Chaffee County, in the Maxwell and Drowney Gulch areas. All the information is on COSWAP's website. A few updates from the Geographic Naming Board. Since the last state land board meeting, the U.S. Board of Geographic Names officially renamed Mount Evans to Mount Blue Sky, and the name change is now official. DNR's tribal liaison delivered a presentation on working with tribes in renaming Mount Evans as the first presentation to the Council of Geographic Name Authorities conference in Portland, which several board members said set them up well for their decision towards the end of the conference. The naming board next meets on November 2nd, and they will continue to prioritize naming proposals that seek to eliminate derogatory named geographic locations. few CPW updates. Dallas May is now the chair of Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission, and he will be replacing Carrie Hauser, who termed off of the commission. The next Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting will be November 16th and 17th in Burlington. As many of you likely saw in the news, Colorado was recently successful in securing a source of wolves to help facilitate the reintroduction before the December deadline. The state of Oregon stepped up and committed to providing Colorado wolves. We have several other source locations in the works. While timing of the capture will depend greatly on the weather, CPW staff are confident that they're positioned to capture and release wolves on the ground before the year's end. We also received good news from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that the agreements needed to allow Colorado to more effectively and fairly manage wolves in the state are in line and will be finalized sometime in November. CPW recently received the National Association of State Park Directors Innovation Award for the implementation of the Keep Colorado Wild Pass. And one note I wanted to make there, I know Josie Heath had a question in our previous update around the numbers of passes that were previously sold. And I just wanted to clarify that before the Keep Colorado Wild Pass was implemented, we were selling around 140,000 passes per year. And as I mentioned in my last update, we recently exceeded 1 million passes so far.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah. CPW is currently in the process of updating several key planning documents, which will help provide direction for the management of state lands, waters, and wildlife in the coming years. These plans include the State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, which is required for the state to receive Land and Water Conservation Fund money, the Habitat Connectivity Plan, which will help define priorities for advancing the conservation of habitat within key migratory corridors for a variety of big game species, and also the State Wildlife Action Plan, which outlines the management priorities for species in the state which are most at risk from habitat loss and population declines. Additionally, CPW has joined together with Great Outdoors Colorado and the Governor's Office and is currently convening a process to develop Colorado's outdoor strategy plan. The statewide plan will be coupled with the Regional Partnership Initiative. These regionally grounded coalitions and plans are intended to bring broad interests together to ensure that Colorado's lands, wildlife, and waters thrive. We would encourage State Land Board staff and commissioners who are interested to consider participating in their local regional partnership initiatives. And with that, I think that pretty much concludes the updates I had prepared today, and happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate you being with us this morning. Any questions for Tim? I think you're free to go back to your retreat.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks again. All right. We are going to move into final action items. And first up, groundwater option and lease, Arapahoe County. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Commissioner Heath, can you see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
You're ready to go.
All righty. Okay, good morning, commissioners. I just realized I have to apologize. It sounded a little hoarse. I was out teaching 150 fourth and fifth graders about water yesterday in Fort Lupton. And they were loud and I tried to be louder, and so now my voice is gone. So anyways, for the record, this is Justin Bieri, the water program manager for the State Land Board. I'm here to discuss a proposed option agreement and groundwater lease in Arapahoe County, and it is a final action item. The cover sheet in your board packet under tab 1 included a description of this project and the details. Today, I'm going to provide some background, of course, explain staff's recommendation, and most importantly, address your questions and public comments as well. Okay, so I'm excited to bring to you today the opportunity to secure revenue and a mutually beneficial option agreement and lease. What I plan, this is going to be a little lengthy. So what I plan to discuss with you is the existing water lease. What we'll get into the details, but the ECCV portion of the existing water lease, the staff proposal, and then the performance projections of the proposal. At the conclusion of our discussion, I hope that you vote in favor to enter into the option agreement and groundwater lease that has the potential to earn the land board $500,000 to $1 million annually for around the next 60 years. So with that, let's jump into the details. So the potential option agreement and groundwater lease is located in Arapahoe County on the Lowry Ranch. So yes, we are talking about Lowry today. So first, to gain some context and we'll talk about a bit of history. In 1982, the land board issued a 99-year lease to OAR Inc. for the development and use of the water on and under the majority of the Lowry Ranch in Arapahoe County. Rangeview Metro District acquired that lease from OAR in 1986. You might recall we visited with Rangeview on Lowry in May when we went out to Lowry and we did the water tour. And Mark and Brent from Rangeview are joined us today as well. Anyway, so the lease between Rangeview and the land board was amended and restated in 2014. I think for the sake of ease, I'll refer to that lease as the 2014 lease. We'll talk about it in some depth later on in this presentation. So the lease, this 2014 lease is quite involved, but generally it allows Rangeview to develop the leased water resources and serve customers located on and off Lowry. And the land board receives percentages of gross revenue generated by water sales by Rangeview. So on this slide, you can see Rangeview's lease is essentially everything within the black boundary of Lowry, except for the gray out parcel on the north end, and we discussed that parcel last month. Okay, ECCV portion. In 1983, so a year after OAR Inc. signed on with the land board to lease the water, OAR entered into a 50-year lease with East Cherry Creek Valley Water and Sanitation District, otherwise known as ECCV. The agreement allowed ECCV to develop the infrastructure necessary to pump 4,000 acre-feet of Arapahoe Basin groundwater below the Lowry Ranch. It's only the Arapahoe Basin groundwater. There's other aquifers. We'll have a diagram in just a minute. The price per acre foot at the time was set to $44 per acre foot, and the land board receives $22 of that lease. The lease states that the infrastructure and the water will revert back to the land board in 2032. So 50 years ago, doesn't matter. Today, we are brushing up against that date. So the ECCV system was developed, and in 2012, ECCV chose to enter into a water purchase and operating agreement with Rangeview. The agreement allows Rangeview to use the ECCV Lowry Ranch water system. In return, Rangeview operates and maintains the system on behalf of ECCV, and Rangeview pays ECCV for the use of the infrastructure and for the water pumped. So this is a little confusing. I want to pause and make sure that it's clear. OAR, Rangeview, leased water to ECCV. ECCV is now leasing it back to Rangeview. Okay. All right, and I mentioned a minute ago that this is only Arapahoe groundwater. So this diagram is where I've circled is highlighting the Arapahoe groundwater. So the top layer would be in the Denver Basin suite of aquifers is the Dawson Aquifer. It's the most shallow. Next would be the Denver Aquifer, and then the Arapahoe Aquifer. This next map is depicting the ECCV water system, wells, and pipelines. Again, there were 8 ECCV wells. Today, 6 are in operation and currently functional. Okay, Rangeview relies on this ECCV system quite heavily. It's a significant portion of their water operations. And as the 50-year agreement between ECCV and Rangeview nears expiration, Rangeview is evaluating operations and working to determine how it might replace not only a large portion of its annual Denver Basin groundwater pumping, but also the infrastructure, especially the infrastructure. Should the system no longer be available to Rangeview, the 2014 lease between Rangeview and the land board provides sufficient water supplies. So the water supply isn't necessarily the question because they have sufficient water supply. It's more of the existing infrastructure. The challenge that they face is they would need to replace, again, all that infrastructure. So that would include pipelines, pumps, operating systems like SCADA systems, and wells. And those wells cost around $500,000 per well and going up, of course. So in the coming years, they're always looking to the future, right? That any municipal water provider needs to guarantee that when their customers go to turn on their sink and their showers, that water's going to be there. So they're always looking to the future. And Rangeview is no different. They have to plan multiple years in advance for what they need. And this ECCV system being in question has caused them to look, do we need to be replacing these wells? What do we need to do? And so to replace 6 to 8 wells of the system, they need to be working towards that now if we're not going to enter into an option lease agreement with them. This photo is actually of a well drilling rig that was out there this year, drilling 2 wells, one in the Denver Basin and one in the Arapahoe Aquifer as well. Okay, so I think there are many options, but we've identified 2 for simplicity. We can take no action and the system will revert back to the land board in 2032. At that time, or prior to that, we would seek to find another operator, another lessee, whoever would want to operate that ECCV system. Yeah, go ahead.
Just Commissioner Chavez. There's still a 99-year lease that sits out there also.
The 2014 lease, yes. Yep.
So could we even lease that or let another person use that infrastructure? What is the 99, 2000, what do they call it, you say?
Yeah, the 2014 lease. Sorry. Yep. So as I mentioned, it provides, and stop me with this question. The 2014 lease provides over 1 million acre-feet of water to Rangeview. So this portion that we're talking about today, the 4,000 annual acre-feet, just Arapahoe water.
So that they don't.
Which, this is Greg, Assistant Director, which reverts to the state land board in 2030.
The infrastructure does.
And the water.
And the water. Okay, so that's separate from the 99.
Correct. That's my understanding of it.
So the 99 doesn't override the whole Lowry Ranch.
It does, but there's this carve out. The ECCV agreement was a carve out when it was written 50 years ago, or however long ago, it specified that that 4,000 acre feet and any infrastructure which was developed in association with it would revert to the land board in 2032.
Yes. At the conclusion of
But it doesn't do anything else to the 2014 lease. So full in effect.
Yeah. And the 2014 lease actually even calls out this ECCB portion. So
in theory, we could try to market.
We could. Right. Yes. In theory. Yeah. So we could market 4,000 annual acre feet of Arapahoe groundwater and the infrastructure that all reverts back to the land board. So that would be the left portion of the slide is no action. We're not going to sign on. And down the road, we'll address it. Somebody else, Rangeview, something else, kick the can down the road, so to speak. The other option that we've identified is to take steps to lease the ECCV system to Rangeview upon the expiration of the agreement. So in 2032, Rangeview would be able to continue to operate this system. So that would eliminate the need for Rangeview to develop new wells, new pipelines, and it would provide the land board some certainty that we'd be able to monetize this system that would be reverting back to the list. So after consideration, staff believes the best path forward is to enter into an option agreement and groundwater lease with Rangeview, and here's why. Two main benefits, I think. We'll get into the details of the proposal. I'll brush through them real quick. There's a guaranteed payment. Well, two items. One being a financial benefit, the other being a stewardship benefit. As far as financial goes, there's what's been proposed is there's a guaranteed payment, and the ECCV pumping will no longer be at this low $22 an acre foot rate. It would be at a market rate. Also, there's no certainty that we would find another lessee to lease the wells in the 4,000 acre feet, especially at the rate that's being offered in this proposal. Municipalities in the area are working hard to rely less and less on Denver Basin groundwater, and they already have a large portfolio of it. To give you an example, the neighboring municipality, Aurora, their municipal footprint, their boundaries, they have all the Denver Basin groundwater tied up. They have it decreed in water court. So they have plenty of Denver Basin groundwater. They don't use it though. It's more of a drought safety valve, so to speak. So
just, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Again, on the financial benefit side, that would change on our approval of this, our potential approval.
Right.
It would be immediate from 22 to 500.
I'm not sure that's true.
Well, I'll get into the detail. Yeah, we'll get into the details. Yep. I'm just teasing you with this here.
This is just the start.
Yeah. Okay, and then the stewardship side. So broad brush strokes financially, and then stewardship. Generally, we're drilling fewer holes in the ground. So if we don't enter into this agreement and lease, Rangeview is going to drill more wells anyways to access the water that's available to them. So if we enter into it, it's fewer straws to suck water out of the ground. Also, currently 6 of the 8 wells, as I mentioned, are operational, and really Rangeview would have no reason to bring those wells that are down back up into operation. They would be installing their own infrastructure just as they did this year with the 2 wells, one in the Denver aquifer and the other in the Arapahoe aquifer. So in 2032, the land board may end up with infrastructure in need of significant deferred maintenance and with unknown interested parties to lease it and bring the deferred maintenance equipment back up into full production. Okay, that all being said, we'll get into the detail now of the proposal. Staff negotiated an option agreement and lease of the ECCV system with Rangeview. The option agreement is the land board provides the exclusive right for Rangeview to lease the ECCV system for $50,000 a year. So to be clear, between 2032, between now 2023 and 2032, Rangeview would pay the land board $50,000 a year. Again, this is a commitment. The land board doesn't currently own this equipment. This is, they're paying us for the right, for the commitment for them to sign on in 2032 to be able to continue to operate it on 2032. So between now and 2032, $50,000 a year.
$50,000, does that prevent us from negotiating then with anybody for the next 60 years?
For the next 9 years, well, because in 9 years, you're going to exercise your option.
Right. But we would not be unable to, or would not.
Yeah, it's a promise for the future. Yep. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. For the lease portion, it's a little bit clearer to break the lease down into 3 general categories: the water, the lease terms, and the payments. So the water, I think hopefully we've made it pretty clear. The water would be 4,000 acre feet, annual acre feet of Arapahoe groundwater, as well as the associated infrastructure. So the wells, the pipelines, the pumps. The lease term, what's been negotiated is that it would follow the existing 2014 lease between the land board and Rangeview. That term is set to expire in 2081. So again, this is the 99-year lease that OAR negotiated back in 1982.
Just one other question while you're talking.
Yep.
What is the price for the water then between 2023 and the royalty 2023 to 2032? Is it 22 or 500?
It's 22 because that's what it's.
Because
that's the agreement.
It still doesn't belong to us. We can't change the royalty rate. The agreement from 2023 and 2030 is still between we can't. It's between ECCV and Rangeview. We're not a party to that agreement.
Oh, right.
Yep. No, great question. Okay, so lease term ends in 2081. Oops, too far. Okay. Excuse me. The lease payments would also follow the 2014 amended and restated lease between the land board and Rangeview. And we would be receiving $5,000 a month that increases 3% every year. So in year 1, we would receive a guaranteed payment of $60,000 at 2032, and then it would go up 3% every year from there. So this isn't the price of the water. This is just a guaranteed payment. This is something that is already in Rangeview and ECCV's agreement. Rangeview pays in their 2012 agreement. Too many agreements. Their 2012 agreement included a monthly payment that Rangeview would pay ECCV, and we said, let's just continue that forward, and they said okay.
I think I'm sorry, Greg Oakers is symptomatic. I think of it as rent for the equipment. So we're going to own equipment, we're leasing you the equipment, and there's ground rent. So that's the rental payment for the physical stuff.
Right. So it's not part of the water itself. It's not a royalty on the water. It's $60,000 that increases 3% every year. And that in 2081, it ends up being $255,000. So is that clear? Does that mean? Okay. So if we're going to follow, if the term and the pricing is going to follow the 2014 lease between the land board and Rangeview, I think it's important to understand some of the details of it. The 2014 lease includes a couple avenues of revenue to be paid to the land board. There's an annual rent and royalties for water use used on and off of Lowry. The annual rent, again, this is already set in the 2014 lease. The annual rent is set to $5,000 a year. That increases every 5 years via an index. And the royalties, grossly oversimplified, are 10 to 12% of Rangeview's gross water revenue sales. There are about 10 different sub-paragraphs on different how we do revenues, but it's 10 to 12%. Okay, the charts that we're looking at here. What I'm trying to show here is the revenue versus the actual water that's pumped. So the top graph that we're looking at, the gray portion of the bars are the 2014 lease between the land board and Rangeview, the revenue. The orange amber slivers on the bottom of the top graph is the ECCV portion of the royalty that the land board receives. That's the $22 an acre foot. Okay. Looking at the bottom graph, that's what's actually pumped. So Rangeview pumps a fair amount of the ECCV groundwater, which makes sense because it's the cheaper water, right? I would pump the cheaper water and use the cheaper water rather than pump and use the more expensive water. So I wanted to give a sense of the importance of the ECCV system pumping to Rangeview and what the land board is paid for that pumping under the current lease. The prevailing thought is that the land board doesn't make a lot from Rangeview currently, and that's largely because the water being pumped is this ECCV water that's $22 an acre foot.
Does the ECCV water go to a specific area? Does it go to a certain development?
It's
wherever they want it to.
It's part of their system. Yep. There are other fees that come into play within the 2014 lease, like storage of foreign water. You'll notice in that top graph that there's a spike in 2021. There was some Wise partnership water stored in Lowry, and it was expensive to them, and so that's the result of the spike. So under this proposal, the water royalties paid to the land board from Lowry would follow the 2014 amended and restated lease. The land board's revenue is a function of Rangeview's revenue, which is a function of the rates it charges its customers. For domestic water, Rangeview sets its rates based on the average rates of 3 other water entities: Parker Water and Sanitation, Castle Rock, and ECCV. So the average of what those entities charge their customers is what Rangeview charges their domestic customers. This is written in the 2014 lease between the land board and Rangeview. The past revenue has largely been dependent on oil and gas sales. Rangeview's housing development, Sky Ranch, to the north of Lowry, off of I-70, is the other primary source of revenue. And the development started using the ECCV water in 2020. Let's see. So if the ECC, I want to play a little what if game here. If the ECCV system was under the 2014 amended and restated lease rates in the past, this is what we would see. So the top graph is the existing, this is what we're actually receiving. So look at the little orange slivers, that's what we would receive, what we are receiving. If the ECCV system was under the 2014 pricing structure, the bottom graph is what we'd be receiving. So these graphs are to the same scale. So in 2022, for example, we received just under $100,000 for this Denver Basin groundwater. If the ECCV water was at the same 2014 lease rate, we would have received over $250,000 in total. Okay, so the revenue is from 2 different things. It's the pricing structure and it's the volume of water that's pumped. The price, as we just talked about, the price is set to a market rate. And in the past, Rangeview hasn't had many customers. as I mentioned, it's been mostly oil and gas, a few other customers here and there. So the volume of water pumped has been pretty low, really, in the grand scheme of things. But we think that that's changing. We think the volume of water is going to go up. So what's the future look like for Rangeview and the volume of water that they're going to pump? This graph is representing Rangeview's Sky Ranch connections and the land board's revenue as a result. So in 2018, Rangeview had no Sky Ranch connections. They had no Sky Ranch water customers. The ECCV system turned on in 2020 for Sky Ranch. Sky Ranch also has their own Arapahoe groundwater that they use. And so this is just it's obviously very linear, but it is the projection of the Sky Ranch development. The Sky Ranch Rangeview is currently serving just under 700 customers, residential customers on Sky Ranch. There are 1,250 units currently platted in Sky Ranch with a total projection of 4,000 customers that they'll serve, and that's slated to be built out by middle 2040. So you can see that their revenue is going to go, or our royalties as a result of their revenue going up, our royalties will go up. Again, this is just for Sky Ranch. So let's take a look at a more general projection that's not just specific to Sky Ranch. So if you look at this graph, the left portion of those hashed vertical lines is what's happened. Okay, so Rangeview has been pumping. It hasn't been a lot. They have been pumping, they have been selling. So that last graph showed there was no pumping, but they have been. So this graph, if you look to the lower line, the black line, that would represent if we didn't sign on to this option agreement and lease. Rangeview would go ahead and install infrastructure and pump the water guaranteed to them under the 2014 lease. Our revenues would increase because they would be pumping the water under the 2014 lease. And then the ECCV agreement would no longer be in effect, and you can see that on both lines in the graph, where it takes basically a vertical jump. We're no longer getting the royalties from the cheap ECCV water, we're getting the royalties from the market rate water. So if the land board does sign on to this proposal, what we're looking at is that top line or the orange line. So that portion between the two hash marks is where we would start receiving $50,000 a year. And then the portion to the right of the vertical hash mark is where we would be receiving the guaranteed payments, starting at $60,000 a year and then concluding at $255,000 a year. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. All right. I just want to make sure I'm getting everything here. So to review, the ECCV agreement ends in 2032. What we're asking you to do right now is to sign on to say that we will extend the ability for Rangeview to continue to operate that system past 2032. That system is important to Rangeview today. And I think it provides them a benefit and us a benefit because we receive more revenue as a result. And again, the stewardship portion is there are just less people on Lowry. If we had multiple water operators, we'd have more people, more holes, more trenches, more everything. Okay, in summary, we are recommending that you vote to issue a new groundwater lease. Exercise to issue an option agreement and groundwater lease with Rangeview Metro District under the terms of the proposed lease.
That's good, Justin.
So I'll open up to questions, comments. As I mentioned, Rangeview, Mark and Brent are here.
I was going to turn to you. At the other end of the table. I feel like we're very, very far apart. Philip and I.
I first would like to disclose that I met Mr. Harding. I met him in May, and then a few weeks ago he came out to our farm with some colleagues, and just to drive around our farm and look at it. So I was not there on the tour, but he was there, and I met him at my office. And none of this was discussed. I'm just, you have your projections, which look good, and they're building homes. They're charging $30,000 tap fees or 20, whatever they are, for to buy a home out there. But over the years, it's a 4,000 acre foot lease, but we're rarely getting 10% of that. What's the average pumping per year? And this is over the last how many years? 30 years, 20 years? The amount of actually pumping and revenue coming to the land board. I just don't. How do we are sure? And you're asking us to extend this for, in essence, for 60 years. But history has shown that the pumping hasn't even come close to 4,000 acre feet. Not even close. And what has been at the lower price, which will change in 9 years. But that's my concern. Another one is that, I mean, this is an important long-term decision, and Aaron and Deb aren't here, which is concerning to me a little bit, or a lot. But the main thing is, I mean, at the time, I think the option fees, the 50,000 a year, great, all that kind of stuff, good. But it's just the track record has been so poor, and has Rangeview actually even made an effort to find other customers to talk to Aurora when, I'm just saying because we're right next to it, when we've been in drought, or this whole area, and they're out buying farmland in the Arkansas Valley, 6,000 acres right around our farm. They're looking for 30-year leases in the Arkansas Valley, and we're right next to one of the hub of, I guess it is, I don't know, they may have, I'm sure they have a lot of other infrastructure. Those are my concerns, the main ones.
Are those questions for Rain? So are you posing those as questions? Because we could ask Ranger too.
No, I'd love to. Yeah, no, Mark's there. I'm sorry, the other two, I can't remember your name.
Right.
Brent, sorry. Dylan, please come up. Mark, please come up to the.
Yes. Please introduce yourself for the record too.
Sure.
Or the merrier.
Mark Harding, I'm the president of the Rangeview Metro District, and I did appreciate the opportunity to tour your farms and Kaplan kids, having been a large owner of the Fort Lyon at one point, so it was interesting to see that. So let me kind of address a global picture of the groundwater and the water lease out in Papio, and we had a ability to talk a little bit about that in May, but it gets more contextual when you're faced with a decision of this nature. So the largest portion of the asset at Lowry is a groundwater lease. It's a non-renewable water supply. And so the challenge with developing non-renewable water supplies are you have to be able to develop that for a community who then wants to be able to provide that on a permanent basis to homes and businesses, right? And so what we have done over the tenure that we've been involved with the lease is not only develop that groundwater supply conjunctively with surface water supplies, but to add other surface water supplies to that lease so that we use this as a reservoir, that it is something that we put water into, it's something that we take water out of, but that we don't use it as a finite resource. And that doesn't work under a circumstance where that resource goes away, like the ECCV contract, right? The ECCV contract had a finite term, it had a 50-year term. And ECCV really abandoned that concept more than 20 years ago. This asset has been an idle asset for ECCV for a very long time because they couldn't put that investment into it, knowing it was going to go away in that period of time. Our perspective is we wouldn't want to do that either, nor would we look to use that asset to just mine it, right? We look to use that asset to be able to to develop that in perpetuity. That we're taking water out, we're putting water back in. So when we look at this, that's our interest in it. And I think Justin sort of looked at this on the aggregate to say, can we find someone else to mine that asset, to put the investment that you need to put into it to mine that asset? I will tell you, it will be a very difficult opportunity to find somebody that will put the kind of investment in there to mine the asset. That's not what we would look to do. That's not what the lease looks to do. And so when you look at this, you need to look at it as, how do you build that? To your point of what's been our track record and our history on that. You know, we have been working to develop that system on a permanent basis for cities and municipalities. Cities and municipalities don't want to have that lease relationship. They need an ownership interest. And so for us to be able to go to a city or municipality and say, gee, would you like, Aurora, would you like to purchase this asset for a period of time? The answer is going to be no. It is going to be no from everybody. And so what happened is the lease got established in the early 80s when the Denver metropolitan area was inside the 225 belt route. It's now grown out to Lowry. It's grown out to 470. It's grown out to the border. You see that every time you tour Lowry. Aurora has grown out to that. We look at that opportunity as developing this resource, this ECCV component of it together with the rest of the resource as a permanent water supply for those decisions that you'll make in the future about developing Lowry. Do you want to develop Lowry? Are you going to be able to develop Lowry on a permanent water supply? And so that's what this decision is. It's to be able to reincorporate that portion that was segregated out in the early 1980s under a concept that may have been a good idea in 1981, but today just doesn't work. And so bringing that back into the aggregate of the lease to manage it conjunctively with surface water supplies, to make the investment that you need to make into it, to be able to take water out, put water back in. And then ultimately at the expiration of the lease, we have the mechanisms in place in that lease that says that it doesn't go away necessarily to the homes that are relying on it. Range you may not be involved, but that permanent water supply will continue to be available for the homes that are connected to it. So that's the critical element of this lease. To bifurcate it out to another supply is probably not in the market. To be able to reincorporate that in the lease and get those revenues as defined in the lease is the highest and best use for it. It will continue to generate revenue and it will continue the stewardship of the asset. So to the technical side and the financial side, there are mechanisms that we've tried to accommodate for that. But the more important aspect of the decision is, okay, we took a look at that experiment. It was unsuccessful for a lot of reasons. To reincorporate that into a managed portfolio that not only has the groundwater leases, but also has other renewable water supplies that can be managed conjunctively with that is really the decision that you're looking at with the city.
Yes, and I wouldn't disagree with that. In regard to the historical and then the future, do you, as a business, Rangeview, do you look at other homes that you do not build? Do you work with anybody or are you looking at supplying them with this water?
No, absolutely. I mean, we look at, so we have two hats. We have a hat as a water utility provider and then one as a developer. And so, we talked a little bit about the utility side of it and developing this asset together with other assets. But then as a land developer, Sky Ranch, Justin brought, that's where we maintain both those roles. We are the land developer. We develop the horizontal infrastructure, sell lots to national home builders, and are the utility provider there. We don't have to be the land developer. We can be just the utility provider, and we're marketing, that opportunity to raw land interests in unincorporated Arapahoe County, while at the same time looking to make sure that we have the capacity available for Lowry, whether we develop that with you or whether a third party develops that with you, to make sure that you have capacity on Lowry to develop that land.
I ask a follow-up, Bill. I think I'm still not quite hearing the answer. I was looking forward to Commissioner Chavez's question, which is, I guess in a nutshell, what are the strategies you're pursuing to grow the business so that we could expect more of this groundwater to be utilized in the future? And
is that
Yes, oh, yeah, 100%. Yes.
And the metro area has kind of grown out to new unincorporated areas. So we're a water provider in an unincorporated area. We would never, no municipality will let another water provider be a water provider in their service area. We can never provide water service to the city of Aurora, to Parker, to Castle Rock. Those are very exclusive territories, and they won't lease water, they will own their water systems. So who is it that we can provide water to? Unincorporated Arapahoe County. And city of Aurora now has grown out to their boundary, and the unincorporated Arapahoe County area is the next area of growth. And it took that 30 years for that growth to occur, right? Annexation, Aurora annexed all those lands out to where their current boundary is in the 1980s. They had an inventory of land and today they have a 50-year inventory of land that still is undeveloped, but in the city. We marked it to undeveloped Arapahoe County.
Just a question, will Aurora annex more ground over time? I mean, I know you don't know that, but I mean, if they've,
right.
Again, my fear is just the term and that asset, that water, tied specifically to, range views to Sky Ranch or other Sky Ranches that you build. And it's, again, 300 acre feet or 400 acre feet a year it's just, when the lease calls for 4,000 acre feet. Another question I had, and I think I asked that in May, when you're recharging surface water into the aquifer, does the land board get paid for that? I can't remember. Is it that was yes? That's at the same place. Yeah, that's what I thought.
And it really is the advantage of this infrastructure, right? To be able to not only get the revenue from the resource that you have, but then the resource that replaces it, so that you've got a multi-generational permanent income stream from this water supply.
Did you have something to add?
I don't know that it was because, but I was going to try and summarize what I think I've heard them both say. And I may get it wrong, so correct me. But I think we have a lease that's ending. If Rangeview would like to assume that equipment and we'll take care of it in the interim here. If we don't do anything, they're going to have to go drill their own wells, create their own system starting now. And I think it's Justin, I think I heard you say it was your opinion that there really aren't going to be other operators for this, given where it is and the condition and the obligations that someone else would be taking on. And so this gives us the opportunity to make sure that the infrastructure is maintained and then has a user at the end.
Absolutely. And that will happen for the next 9 years. I guess, I mean, because as long as it's being used, I would think.
Well, and under this agreement, assuming that you exercise the option, at the end of, this, now it has a long-term maintainer and user, and the water's at a market rate instead of at the bad rate. We cut a bad deal in 1986, I think I think that's what you're saying.
I guess I just want to put a fine point on, and I'm not trying to be persuasive. I just want to know this is the facts. ECCB doesn't want it, right? They've already given up on it. We talked to Aurora, they don't want it because, as Justin pointed out, they've got, what's Aurora now, 365 square miles. They've got all the Denver Basin groundwater under their, so does every other municipality. So if we cannot do this, I just don't have the expectation that we're going to come in 12 months with some. We have not been able to come up with another reasonable option. That doesn't make this. That's not saying that it's still the reason to do this I just want to be clear, it's not like we have other ideas.
And I understand all of that. I still look at history. I look at 60 years. I would certainly sleep a little better and know that I did my job a little better if we just spend a month, 2 months, just talk to people out there and see if they're interested. And in 2 months they say we have zero interest. Yeah, let's do this. But without knowing anything, I mean, you're saying you've talked to people, you've talked to entities.
We can talk to more people. I mean, if you want a list that we check the boxes, we can do that.
Well, if you're saying you have, then I believe you. I'm just, and again, it's my job to ask these questions.
To be clear, we've not called every municipality in the metro area. We've not called, there's probably people we haven't called. I think I'm comfortable we've done due diligence too. I would not have brought it to you if I didn't.
And you know the property, you know the area from your past work. I trust your judgment on that too. I mean, Christine, what?
Well, I think I think all of us candidly defer to your knowledge in this area because this is your world. I think Commissioner Frobe would share that. But she's not here, Erin's not here, and I wanted to explore with you and with Commissioner Heath. For me, it is a long-term decision. And I think we do have to be thoughtful and mindful of consequences of that. Frankly, we had a previous long-term decision which didn't work out so well. So I don't want to rush this if that's not where you're at yet, but I wanted to explore that kind of clarity with you and with Commissioner Heath. Yeah, we are really short on commissioners today, which I'm making some
and I respect what's been done, the infrastructure that's put in. I know Justin did a great lease around the corner. I mean, fabulous lease with whatever that is.
Can I?
Yeah, please. Oh yeah, please.
If you can give us specific feedback to go do the following things, I guess if you're going to defer or something, please tell us what you want us to do so that when we come back, we can give you the information you need to make a decision. That's what I would ask for is if it's not ready, if it's not right, then what will make it right for a decision, yes or no.
And I think from my perspective, and Josie, please, there you are. Oh, her hand's up, please. I'm sorry, no, we didn't see you.
Josie, would you like to comment?
No, I actually had my hand raised for a point of clarification. Is any portion of this water used for agriculture?
We do provide some of this water for the grazing lessee out there.
Commissioner, I would add it's not particularly good. It doesn't serve agriculture well because it's too expensive. So they do use it on occasion, but it is not a logical nor it would not be a normal municipal water would not be a normal source for agricultural water.
Right. I mean, the bigger question here, of course, is at what point do we continue to subsidize? That's not the correct word. Do we provide water for residential development versus the agricultural property that we have in that area?
Well, it's not to say there's not water for the agriculture user. There is. It's just that buying it from a municipal provider is not. We drill our own wells out there to serve the agricultural user. We don't
rely on Rangeview.
Right.
Right. So Nick Trainer has his own wells to support his operation.
Okay. So is really the question here about the lease of the equipment?
No, it's twofold. It's
yes,
the
no.
The ECCV assets are twofold. It's 4,000. It's the right to pump 4,000 acre feet a year out of the Arapahoe Basin aquifer, or the Arapahoe aquifer in the Denver Basin, however that works, and the right to use the infrastructure that ECCV originally built. So it's those two things.
If I could just add something, Chavez, just to kind of, this is Brent with Rangeview. And I think two other important pieces of information that may help is the wells and the pipelines are already 40 years old, and they're steel and they're corroded. So, you know, if the extension isn't made, we'll have to do that in 8 years. If it is, we're gonna have to do replace all those supplies maybe within 20 years. So that's kind of an important part, although, you know, we're paying like rent for the equipment. And we'll continue to do that under the extension of the lease. And part of kind of how we got to that pricing is the understanding that we have to maintain those systems and they're going to have to be replaced. So it's kind of an aging infrastructure already. And then to your point about, you know, we're producing a very small amount of that 4,000 acre feet of Arapahoe water. If we pumped all of those wells every day, 365 days a year, I don't think we could get beyond 1,000 acre feet. There's limitations to the aquifer, and over the Lowry Ranch, it's not as productive as maybe Parker or Castle Rock, where they can get 600 gallons per minute. We're kind of limited to 100. So to get to that 4,000 acre feet, we would have to re-drill 50, 60 wells to get to that level.
Is that part of the plan over time? As
we'll continue to develop it, but it's difficult to get to that point.
I mean, so ultimately that does happen, and you do it in a way that you're protecting the aquifer, but we can't. No one would do it where it goes away, us included. You know, we have, if we're not able to make that investment for a permanent system, then we go find other supplies to do that.
So even if it was someone else, they would have to put in millions and millions and millions of dollars to get to the 4,000.
Where you at? I think we'll probably
I would love Deb and Aaron to be involved.
If you want more time and to think about if there's specific questions to Greg.
Particularly with Deb, she has so much more knowledge on a lot of these things than I do, and just do it. And again, if we can just look around. I know you said you have that, you've done that. Just a little more time.
Okay.
You know, I know we're busy next month, maybe December or something. Or
December's our celebration month.
Celebrating
It's true. It's true.
Greg Okish, Assistant Director, I'm going to press you a little bit. So specifically, you would like us to make a few more phone calls and see if we get anybody who says they'd be interested in something like this and give you that information. And then you're saying, please make the same presentation.
I had a suggestion, maybe offline, because I hate to do the whole thing again. Maybe Justin, you can find time with and just
one off.
Yeah, exactly. So we're well briefed going into the conversation without having to repeat this. And
well, and we record all this, so we can also the video and send it to.
That's true too. That's
Aaron
true too. That might
Josie,
and
so
just if Justin would be open for questions or
So the only new information you'd like is for us to do a little more
outreach. It sounds like, and report back on who you've talked to and how the conversation went and how whatever time that might take. I'm comfortable with that if you're comfortable with that.
I think that'd be great.
Commissioner Heath, are you all right if we table this for a minute? Okay.
Yes.
All right. We appreciate you being with us.
Yeah. Is there any other information you would like from Range if we can get back together?
Now that we have the projections of, I mean, I think that's
for those in your mind, were those accurate? Were those reflective of what you anticipated?
I mean, obviously you supplied those to.
Yeah, you know, I think those show the build out of Sky Ranch a little bit longer than I think will happen. You know, we'll build out sooner than what those projections are, just because, you know, the metro area is there. Sky Ranch is what I would say, it's hard to say that any home less than 500,000 is entry level home, but there's just not any Sky Ranches out there. So entry level lots that we're marketing are, you know, in high demand. The national home builders are very successful about putting a product that they may be building in Parker, which costs $650. They can build the same home at Sky Ranch and be at $480. And so that's a big difference, even with rising interest rates. So, you know, affordability is the key opportunity for these areas.
A good point though, if those existing 6 wells, and I guess if you retrofit it or fix the other 8, you can't even pump 1,000 acre feet running every day. What's the schedule for putting in new wells? Is that just goes along as you build?
Well, so that's really what spurred this conversation, is that we were saying, okay, we've got to build new pad sites. We'd like to do it on the existing pad sites, but cannot, but for the fact that this thing goes away. And that's when Justin said, hold on, that's a big deal, because if we have to triple our footprint out there for wells, and you could do that necessarily by starting on the existing pads, that's something of interest. And that's that's not insignificant in this decision.
We're developing the surface water assets as well. We installed some new Box Elder Creek alluvial wells that weren't part of this discussion because they're not groundwater, but we're continuing to bolster all of our supplies. And those wells also are develop royalty revenue for the land board. It's the same exact.
So the Box Elder and the other, I know there's another, I can't think of it, Coal Creek, yeah. Those are land board water rights, that surface portion.
They're part of the lease.
Yeah, no, they're part of the lease, but they're, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that you'd be using that surface water, which is our water right.
Yes.
To recharge, right, or make a reservoir.
Yes.
To put a fine point on it, I believe all the water rights are jointly under their name and our name.
That's forever, or ends in 81?
Pardon?
Is that forever, the water rights, or does that end in 2081?
What's the interest?
I'm going to reserve an answer on it.
Yeah, well, we're all defer.
Generally speaking, we own fee interest to some portion of the portfolio.
I remember that presentation.
And then the balance of the portfolio is the land boards, and it terms in 2081, but then there's provisions that allow it to continue to be made available, whether Rangeview operates that system or somebody else operates that system. And then there are additional water rights that Rangeview has purchased to augment, the sustainability of the system.
My recollection was like 10,000 acre feet is what you have feet.
Yeah. Sorry, Commissioner, if it were any other water right, I would have tried to answer the question.
All right, I think we have a path forward. I don't want this to be a pop quiz. So Philip, if you think of other things that would be helpful in terms of directing staff or any of the commissioners, that would be great. And we'll come back as you see fit against our upcoming agendas.
Like to, I don't know what November looks like. I'd like to not drag this out. So if we understand we have a full slate.
I'll leave that to you to figure out how to manage our agenda. And I wanted to check 2 things. You have a hard stop today. For sure. What time do you have to leave for the airport?
11:30.
Okay. So I want to talk through agenda with you.
Okay.
While we take a little bit of a break, if we could. Let's see what time.
If it was just me, it'd be later, but my wife is at the hotel getting fancy.
No, well, it's an international flight. I think you should actually get to the airport. Let's come back in like 5 or so, if I can have a quick conversation with you.
Do you need a half hour on the annexation?
Well, depends on the questions. I don't need that far to talk.
So
talk in 10.
That's we need to get done. The revenue accounting policy we could put off.
Philip, you're very far away.
I know. What was the movie where the people had dinner at opposite ends of a long table? Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Might have been.
James Bond film too, where James Bond, there was a bullet or the gun that went underneath it.
We have not rigged this for that.
Yeah, hold on. Jeez, Greg, just squeeze.
Just one of the roads that was a very uncomfortable movie to watch.
Yeah.
I don't like angry things like that.
Yeah.
Why did I do this? Why did I watch it?
You're ready to go. Greg.
Okay, we are back online. We are going to go to final action item B, Dow Junction annexation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Greg Ofish, Assistant Director. This is another step forward on a project we've talked about multiple times now. Most recently, I think in September. It's the what we're calling the Dow Junction redevelopment. And what we're trying to do on this piece of state trust land in Eagle County is really set the stage for community housing development on a pretty significant piece of state trust land. The project, as I just mentioned, is located in Eagle County. And on this map, we are the blue square, very strategically located at the nexus of town of Avon, Vale, Eagle Vale, right along I-70 and Highway 6, where in an area of the state where there's really an affordable housing, as in many parts of the state, an affordable housing crisis. They estimate that they are short as many as 6,000 affordable housing units in this valley. I believe I've shown you this before, but this is a draft map of the zoning we are working to get entitled on this piece of property. This is Highway 6 along the bottom of the map, towards the bottom. This is I-70. This is the not inactive Union Pacific Railroad tracks, and this green stripe is the Eagle River. The properties, this is about 90 acres. So we own 640 acres. We're only working to annex and zone about 90 acres, as shown on this map. It conceptually could accommodate up to 700 community housing units and 60,000 square feet of commercial space. This is the annexation map. It's pretty simple. We are essentially drawing a line around the land we would like to annex. An important part is these two cross-hatch lines up on the top of that. This one and this one are one of the key points for establishing meeting one of the main criteria for annexation was that at least 1/16 of the property is adjacent to the annexing municipality, and these two lines exceed that area. I don't have anything else.
Because we're bordering Avon there.
There, yes. Yeah. And I don't really have anything else I was going to say about this. Let's see if questions.
If I'm, oh, sorry, you have more slides.
The annexation is, as I said in the cover sheet, really the precursor to zoning and development. We're recommending annexation of about 97.6 acres. It's a statutory process. We would intend to, if you approve it today, submit the map and petition. The petition was attached to your cover sheet on about November 14th. The reason for that slight delay is as soon as we submit it, it triggers a number of timeframes for public hearings. And if we were to submit it tomorrow, which I originally thought we were going to do, we land right in the middle of the holiday season. There's a chance that they would not have a meeting within the 90-day window that we would need to, and we'd have to start all over. So it's better for us to submit in November. Again, there will be multiple public notifications and meetings as a result. We've importantly, for you all, maintained a right to withdraw the petition should we enter into negotiations about development agreements and zoning and find out that we're unable to come to agreement with the town on a critical issue. And we will be back. This is only the first step. We will be back to ask you to approve a zoning and development agreement, which will really be the document that specifies our obligations under moving forward and what the town, since the town is willing to provide certain incentives, waive fees, waive certain taxes and things along the way. That'll all be baked into the development agreement. So we'll be back with that. So all we're asking you to approve today is the technical petition and zoning map so we can get the process started. I think our goals are met by ultimately annexation. Right now we're unincorporated Eagle County. There is no zoning in place. So annexing and creating zoning will increase the value of the state trust land. It will create the opportunity for us to generate meaningful recurring revenue. On the majority of the site right now, we're in the public access program. That's really the only revenue source for the majority of the site at this time. Ultimately, the disposal, it's likely the phase one, I'm getting ahead of myself here, set up ourselves, but ultimately we would develop a phase one, most likely in a ground lease, and that would generate recurring revenue, but future transactions could be land disposal. So that would create funds that could go into the ESE fund and help us meet our asset allocation goals. It is one of our goals to collaborate with local elected officials, and we are doing that as part of this process. I think it's been very successful. I think that might be what Bill is going to touch on and let him do that. This will allow us to utilize state trust land as a location for affordable housing. And I put a when in there. It's when that is not our mission, but when that does align with our mission, when it meets our other goals, it's something we've worked very hard to accomplish, as you all know. And this will facilitate that. And there would be a significant part of this parcel of the 90 acres we annex. Only about 35, I think, are developable. The rest will be leaving to the town as open space parks. So there will be a component of this that would protect natural values on the property in the long run. So with that, staff recommends that the board approve petitioning for the annexation of a portion of the Dow Junction State Trust land in the town of Avon, and that you direct staff to submit the annexation petition and something else. It's essentially the form presented in exhibits 1 and 2. Yeah. Matt, thank you.
So in the missing letter.
Bill, did you want to add anything?
Well, I had thought you were stopping before, and so I guess what I wanted to say about the public process, we were up there yesterday, was it? I guess Tuesday for the day. We had a public work session with the Eagle County commissioners, at which all 3 of their commissioners were there, a number of their staff, and we began the process of asking them to dedicate water for this. They have water that's specifically to be used for affordable housing. And that meeting went very well, and it was, live streamed on Eagle County, whatever it is, their television station up there. And then that evening we met with the town of Avon. Again, it was all their city councilmen, town councilmen and planning staff, a public meeting with public comment. But in both of those meetings, I thought our team did a really nice job, but more importantly, everybody has leaned into this. This is a real opportunity up there for those communities, and they recognize that, and they're figuring out ways to work collaboratively to get this done. They have, as Greg said, they have a huge need up there. What they don't have is land. And suddenly, out of nowhere, we're making available 35 acres for 700 housing units, which will all be restricted as affordable. Affordable is a broad definition up there. I want to be real clear that, that gets up to 140% of AMI. But it's resident occupied. These aren't going to be second homes. So there will be restrictions up there that these are really community housing units, and everyone up there so far has been leaned in. So Greg and the team have done a great job getting us to this point, and now we're entering into a sort of formal process of steps that we've got to go through: annex into the town, get the water committed, get zoning, get a plat. But
by starting the process now, it's our intention that we would have the first phase site ready for a developer to start work by next August or September. So that we may or may not be able to make that schedule, but that's our goal. And this will be the first step on that path.
Commissioner Heath has a hand up.
Yes, you mentioned that you had water secured for affordable housing. Is that the Eagle Regional Water Authority?
There are 2 entities up there. That's one of them. The other is the Upper Eagle River Valley Water and Sanitation District, and the third one is Eagle County itself. Eagle County is the entity that set aside 100 acre-feet specifically for support of community and affordable housing. So they would dedicate, I don't know if they dedicate it, they would make the water available to the Water and Sand District, who would then deliver it to the site.
So we have, or your consortium has secured adequate water for all 700 units?
We're in that first meeting we had on Tuesday was a work session. There was general consensus that this is the kind of project they set that water aside for, but we have to start the formal process of having that water assigned. So we're working on that.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Heath, if for some reason that water weren't made available to support this, we can withdraw from the annexation if we wanted to.
Okay, thank you.
That was a fast 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? I know this is being tracked very closely in the high country, so I think it's exciting. And now people know what the land board is. For some folks.
Rat.
Exactly.
I was impressed with all the different ways that last month, the different ways of doing workforce housing, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
It's really fascinating, different approaches, and it's
well, this is I wish it was in Summit County, but it's not. We need it just as much. So it's a huge deal. I appreciate all the work and all the trips up to Eagle County that you're making, and many more to come, I'm sure. But with that, if there's no other commissioner comments, I'll open it up to public comment. See if anyone's online.
Folks listening online, if you want to use the raise hand feature to address the commissioners on this item, do that. I'll give you a few seconds to catch up. No raised hands, Commissioner.
Okay, with that, I think we are ready for a motion.
Commissioner Chavez, I move.
Oh,
yep, go ahead.
Go ahead, Josie.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Commissioner Heath, I move the board adoption of the Dow Junction annexation as described in the board packet.
Thank you. Motion, Commissioner Heath.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Chavez. We'll call a vote. Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
Commissioner Heath?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That passes 3-0. We will move forward from here. Thank you.
thank you.
All right, next up is policy review, revenue accounting. This sounds really exciting.
Spice it up, Nick.
Feel too bad as you sit down.
Good morning, commissioners. Assistant Director Nick Massey here to present about 60 minutes worth of material.
I deserve that.
Can you tell us what debits and credits are?
I can, but not in a way that would be accurate or helpful. Some real minor changes we would like to make to the revenue accounting policy. A quick reminder was that we created this policy a few years ago with the intent of outlining some very specific actions that the staff can take primarily when looking at the accounting for royalties, mineral royalties. So it's there, it's due for an update, and we just tried to minimize what we were updating this time around. Happy to answer any questions with you regarding it.
Any questions for Nick?
Very minor, like you said.
Very minor. I think we changed a signature and a parenthetical phrase or something.
Nice, nicely done. I don't see any questions from commissioners. Do you want to run back to your other seat? If there's any public comment?
Members of the public, if you'd like to weigh in on the revenue accounting policy update, please raise your hand. I was sort of expecting one out of guest, but
I was
no raised hands at all.
Okay, with that, we will need a motion.
Commissioner Chavez, I move we approve the policy review of revenue accounting 200-009 as described in the board's package.
And a second?
Second.
Motion, Commissioner Chavez, second, Commissioner Heath. We'll call a vote. Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
Commissioner Heath?
Yes.
And chair votes yes, that passes 3-0. Excellent job, Nick. All right, we are on to the board leasing agenda for October. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, commissioners. We have the October 2023 board leasing agenda for your approval. Subsequent to its publishing in the board packet, items number 1 and 3 have been removed. And so we are only seeking your approval of item number 2, recreation links in Logan County today. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm just curious, what, the recreation, was that?
Item number 1 and
separate.
Yeah.
The recreation lease was because
That's part of PICO.
Partner
so the Phillips family also had the rec lease. Is that why?
applied.
Oh, gotcha.
Nobody has a rec lease today, but the Box T Partners applied for both recreation and agriculture. And so under the request for review, we thought it appropriate to hold both of them.
I don't see any other commissioner comments. We can open this for public comment.
Members of the public, use the raise hand feature. No hands raised at this time.
All right, terrific. With that, we'll need a motion.
I move to approve the board agenda for October 2023.
Can we clarify on the item number 2?
Oh, yes, of course. With the deletion of item 1 and 3.
And a second?
Second.
All right, a vote. Motion, Commissioner Chavez. Second, Commissioner Heath. A vote, Commissioner Chavez.
Yes.
Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
And chair votes yes, that passes 3-0. Cruising along now. All right, any changes to the minutes from September? Don't see any, so we will have the minutes approved by acclamation.
No, one moment.
Oh, okay.
Hi, this is Commissioner Heath. Yes, on page 37, there's a correction that needs to be made. And it's in a statement for me when I say, unless number 1 is implemented, the motion or the statement I made was number 2 cannot be implemented. But the way the minutes read here, it looks as if that's contradictory. So I would like to have that corrected.
Okay. Dr. Ryan?
We will get that corrected. We'll also correct the spelling of Kathy Gephardt's last name.
Okay, very good. Very good. All right, we will make those changes. Will we have to approve the minutes again next month after we make the changes, or can we approve them by acclamation? Subject to those changes.
I think you can, given the nature of the changes.
Okay.
They're basically typo corrections.
Okay. All right, very good. We will do so. Okay, we're going to move to information items. Mindy's always our favorite. I hate to put that out so public with the rest of the staff here, but she probably is. Our annual stewardship report.
Greg, I'm sure you're in the top 25.
Yeah, and then
thank you, Commissioner.
Now, this is always a great report, so I appreciate you being with us, Mindy.
I'm Mindy Gottsagen, the Conservation Services Manager for the state. It's my pleasure to present the fiscal year 23 annual stewardship report. This is the board information item. We know action asked of you today, although I will prep you in that presentation will end with 3 questions. And I just want to relay what they are, is that one, obviously, if you have any questions about any of the stewardship tools, but secondly, and third, is if there's anything that we're missing that you think we should pursue or at least investigate, I'd love that feedback at the end. And then secondly, what other information would you, so not just a kind of a program to pursue or investigate, but what other kind of information would you like to see in the stewardship report? This report does tend to grow a little bit every year when I'm like, oh, we forgot to do that last year. So I'll try to keep to my allotted 30 minutes if that's possible. So we've often heard that we have a dual mission to generate revenue for our trust beneficiaries and to use sound stewardship. I feel that sound stewardship today will lead to sustainable revenue tomorrow. These two goals are intricately linked, and I'll be talking mostly about this stewardship part two. I wanted to start with a brief very brief overview of the history of stewardship with the State Land Board. Obviously, we've been leasing since statehood for a variety of uses. But the programs that we kind of think of our stewardship tools today really started about 46 years ago with the creation of the Colorado Natural Areas program that is managed through CPW. Currently, that program has about 100 properties in it, and some of those involve state trust lands. I'll be talking about that in the future. Back in the late 70s, we also started to use long-term non-development plan leases. We've moved away from that. We had very few of those left, and it's not a common tool that we use today. In each of these categories, the tools that were developed carry forward, and so they kind of build upon one another. Obviously, an important time in history was Amendment 16. The voters approved amendment to the state constitution, and that was the creation of the Stewardship Trust. In the immediate years that followed, the board and predecessors designated almost 300,000 acres into the Stewardship Trust. And as you know, that amount is size limited. That legislation also created, Amendment 16 also set the stage for reasonable and consistent revenue to be applied to all state lands, where the board is no longer had its hands tied to always accept the highest bid for any property regardless of stewardship outcomes. And then finally, in the mid-80s, we really began to use stipulations for oil and gas and solid mineral leases. That continues to expand, and we now look at all surface disturbing activities for proposed impacts and for these stipulations. Another change happened when in 2011, actually my position was created, the Stewardship Trust, the Conservation Services Manager, to really manage the Stewardship Trust and have someone be working on that full time. And with that, we also began to realize that we needed tools beyond just the Stewardship Trust and the Natural Areas program. And so staff presented and the board approved asset management plans, stewardship action plans, and then in 2013, our first regenerative holistic lands and leases. All of this fell under the broader umbrella of the agency's strategic plan, which previous to that time, the boards had rarely adopted them or followed them. And then the last area really started around 2017, where there was this integration of these land-based stewardship tools with internal operations. And agency and business plan goals all included goals for stewardship. It's one of the 4 large categories right now within the agency's strategic plan. And actually every employee with their individual performance objectives also incorporated and developed stewardship goals. The Stewardship Trust management plans were prepared for all of our 100 and so properties that are in the Stewardship Trust. We're still working on developing best management practices. And then with the creation of kind of Kristen's position, really kind of focusing on what we're doing with stewardship and making that an important component of our outreach. And then 4 years ago, we created a new position just for the Stewardship Trust, because that really does need one person to help monitor those properties and manage those properties to the best of their ability. So I just talked a little bit about the land management tools. That'll be the focus of my presentation today. And these are the administrative tools. Each of these have components. I just went through some of these. The outreach that Kristen does, the lessees in the ag and stewardship forums, personnel performance plans, the line of business plans, and agency funding all work together and are all coordinated on both ends through the annual strategic plan and the annual business goals. So again, my presentation today is going to focus on these land-based stewardship tools. I'm going to present these in the order in which they were created through the years, and also present them in relative size to one another. The first was in 1907 with the Natural Areas program that today encompasses 32,000 acres on state trust lands, a little more. Then came the Stewardship Trust, that's just under 300,000 acres. These stipulations then started in the late 2000s, Today, we've applied lease stipulations on over 400,000 acres. Asset management plans began in 2012 with the Lowry Range, or the Lowry Ranch was the first one. Today, there's over 400,000 acres that have been looked at and included in the asset management plan. And finally, stewardship action plans, these landscape scale, broad-based plans that can save the board time and save the staff time and let our lessees and the public know that how we're managing these lands that are involved in these special, that have species on them or special kinds of vegetation. And finally, our last one, the number of properties, the amount of acreage that we have under regenerative grazing leases. And these are the larger properties that we know about. It's very likely that some of our lessees that have their own smaller leases are already doing this, but it is under the radar for us. So these tools, these 6 that I just mentioned, total up to about 1.3 million acres of state trust lands. I do want to emphasize that these are just, that's the acreage that are subject, that are involved with these plans, these specific tools. All of our leases, and almost, 98% of our land is leased for grazing. All of those also have stewardship components, as well as many of our other leases have stewardship requirements within them. So really all state trust lands are subject to stewardship provisions. So the first of these is the Colorado Natural Areas. Again, it started in 1977. They currently have 96 properties that are identified for their unique and special natural features within the state. These occur on federal lands, state lands, and private lands. The State Land Board, as I mentioned before, has 24 properties. Out of the 96, that's almost exactly 25% of the natural areas occur on state trust lands. And this is managed through the Colorado Natural Areas Council and their staff. You may remember that the State Land Board has a permanent seat on that council. It's currently filled by Commissioner Josie Heath. Lindsay Brandt, our Stewardship Trust Manager, also attends those meetings. And in the last year, 63% of all of this, all of the natural areas that we do have, there's 24 that own state properties. Most of them have a volunteer steward, a citizen science person that goes out and looks at it every single year. And so they're able to monitor those changes every year based on drought or changing conditions. Lindsay sometimes accompanies those. And that's an important part of our program. There's not a lot of change with this one, but it's just, those are some of the highest natural values that are found on our land. And of those 24 properties, all but 2 of them are also in the stewardship trust. The second tool that we have is the Stewardship Trust. And this is what I think of as our flagship tool in a way. It was created as an amendment to the state constitution. We currently have 105 properties that are designated and just under 296,000 acres. You may remember this is capped at 300,000 acres. We can't go above it. And of the changes that you made this past spring, that acreage just
net doesn't have to go if you don't want it. You'll have
and then some of the objectives and accomplishments for the Stewardship Trust this past year, 31 of 105 properties were monitored. 100% of properties were inspected within the last 3 years. This is a component of the Stewardship Trust management policy where the property has to be monitored at least once every 3 years. And so we've been able to achieve that for many years in a row. And that basically requires that Lindsay, the Stewardship Trust Manager, has to accomplish a review of at least about a third every year.
Is there a difference between monitored and inspected?
Not really.
Just
yeah. Oh, I did use the 2 words, didn't I? Yeah, we kind of go back and forth on those, but yeah, it's just a different word. Sorry.
Okay.
I will say that our district staff who go out to inspect properties, we tend to use the word inspected for that, or at least compliance.
And monitor, I was thinking like devices
right.
there, or doing soil moistures or
no, it's not that detail. I just mentioned again that we removed 2 properties this past year, the Bohart Ranch and La Jara, in anticipation of upcoming transactions involving those properties. in replacement, and that involved about 25% of the Stewardship Trust. There's two landscape scale properties. In their place, we designated, the board designated 3 new large properties and added smaller areas to its 3 existing properties. And finally, this past year, as a result of these new properties coming into the Stewardship Trust and anticipating and getting ready for other changes that might come up, we contracted for 16 separate property surveys involving rare plants, some ecological baselines for properties that had never been evaluated before for natural values, and also erosion and cultural resources. The third tool is the asset management plans. These are plans for some of our largest properties. They tend to be about 20 to 20,000 acres or larger in size. So now and those asset management plans include the history of the property, how we acquired it, what are the its net present value or its returns, income that comes in, its opportunities for future use through a variety through all of our business plans, and then goals for the future management of that property. We currently have 9 properties that have asset management plans. They total just over 400,000 acres. And these are updated every 5 years as a rule. What's happened this past year, though, we did not update the plans for Bohart Ranch and La Jara because of our planned disposal of those properties. And a third property, the Hesper's property down outside of Durango, we've not also updated that plan. That was last done in 2015. But since that time, Fort Lewis College wanted to take over the majority of the management of that property. And so the board entered into agreement with them to do that. And so we will now be planning to update that asset management plan either. So, and then the newest one that came in where an asset management plan is currently underway for the Badger Creek property that the board designated into the Stewardship Trust back in March. With those changes made altogether, we'll have 7 properties that have asset management plans in the next coming year or two, just under 400,000 acres. And this is a picture of the Badger Creek property in the lower part of Park County and the northern part of Fremont County. I just mentioned the asset management plan is underway, and I hope to bring it to you. Lindsay Brand is managing that project, and we hope to bring it to you either in December or in the early spring, or the late winter. It's over 35,000 acres, and it has 10 surface lessees. The fourth tool is our stewardship action plans. These are plans that, again, are landscape scale and include many of our non-contiguous properties, but all are subject to many of the same conditions. For example, the first one that the board prepared was for Grady sage-grouse in 2016. And so in one fell swoop, effectively, these are all board approved, and you basically apply, you let our lessees know if we're interested in becoming lessees, other public land management agencies, that within these broad areas, the board has applied certain leasing directives or recommendations for management across these non-contiguous properties. The second one that was prepared was for lesser prairie chickens in 2020 and the fens in 2020 as well. And there is some contemplation for, this is the total number of acres. There's about 1,100 surface parcels that are affected by one of these 3 stewardship action plans. They also applied in some degree to the subsurface assets within them as well. And what this does is triggers a special review, and we would take a look at how leasing may happen on these. If there are site circumstances that would suggest that we could forego some of the recommendations, we would bring those leasing recommendations to you. And there are other plans contemplated for streams and wetlands, Gunnison sage-grouse, and rare plants. And just a little bit more information about these plans. Again, they're board approved because they contain these leasing directives and stipulations. And mitigation is required for permanent loss of habitat. This may not be the case for future asset management plans, but for the 3 that we have today, we require that if there is impact, that the lessee or the operator mitigate for that permanent adverse impact. And they also include an adaptive management component. So we take a look at them and see if there are any changes that need to be made. It requires me to give you an annual report. This report today includes that. In the cover sheet, I would have recommended any recommendations for change. For these three plans, I've not recommended any recommendations for change at this time. They, again, these plans are brought back to you every 5 years. And I mentioned the three that exist now. The most recent one was 2021. So, and the other ones were 2020. So you won't be seeing these for a couple of years to review, unless you'd like them to bring to you sooner. So foregone revenue, this is an important component of these stewardship action plans. Because of these leasing directives and stipulations, we are aware that we've given up some revenue for our trust beneficiaries. In fiscal year 2023, there were 2 oil and gas leases that were not offered because they were in greater sage-grouse habitat. So these were properties, nominations were made and staff withdrew them based on the recent directives in the stewardship action plan. There were 2 renewable energy leases that were not accepted. And this wasn't because of the stewardship action plan. This was under some new leasing policy for renewable energy. One was located in the stewardship trust, and based on your new policy, that was a no-go. And also one property had high forage production value. So that was also not leased. So staff's estimate, my estimate of the total estimated net present value, the 30-year revenue that we have foregone, starts at 1.6 million. That's the amount of money we know we would have expected to get under a traditional planning lease. Planning leases tend to last 3 years, and there's a certain ground rent for that. The harder number to quantify is the larger one, 23.7 million. That's under a 30-year lease. What we have to estimate what amount of the planning lease would have gone on to production based on current rates, based on our experience with how much of the land they lease actually ends up in production. But we've estimated 23.7 to date. And we started calculating this figure about 4 years ago. Are there any questions about this? And the other component, so we're getting a little bit away from some of the land-based stewardship tools in terms of a program per se, but these stipulations, these are very commonly used now on many of our properties that have surface disturbing activities. They cover components or stewardship elements that are not already addressed in the lease. In some cases, these may eventually go into the lease. Right now, the lease is silent on them, so we've added them. And this information I'm presenting today is just for the new leases, the proposed new leases that came to the board in fiscal year 2023. So 59 tracts, subsurface tracts were nominated for oil and gas leasing, and staff reviewed all of those. 16 of those tracts were eliminated due to ecological. I don't have the list of exactly why for each one of those. In addition, there were 37 other surface development leases reviewed, and all but 2 of those were leased. And those 2 were the ones I mentioned before, location in the stewardship trust and high forage value. This resulted in 78 tracts being leased, and that contained, so all of the ones that were leased, 100% of those contained some form of stipulation. And an staff audit found that 100% of the active lessees stipulations have either been met or are being applied. In some cases, if there's 2 or 3 stipulations, they may be applied over time at the appropriate season. In some cases where oil and gas leasing, you could have one pad go in and meet all the leasing stipulations. A second pad may come in and they haven't completed all of their stipulations, but staff's conclusion was that 100% of the active leases are being met with those stipulations.
Quick question. On do you feel our stipulations are more stringent than BLM or Forest Service or same?
I would, that's a great question. Ours are more
nuanced.
It is nuanced, is that what you said?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to put a word in your mouth.
Ours are In some cases, they're exactly the same. We've taken our recommendations, for example, the Greater Sagebrush Stewardship Action Plan. We took those recommendations and stipulations, and we kind of stood shoulder to shoulder with BLM. They developed a plan for Northwest Colorado. We adopted very similarly those recommendations with just 1 or 2 exceptions. Those would be the same. For Lesser Prairie Chicken, the only plan down there is CPW's recommendations. We've adopted most of those in our Stewardship Action Plan. In some cases, if you compare them to what the county requires, like wetlands, for example, many counties are silent on wetland regulations. If it doesn't affect the jurisdictional wetlands that are administered by the Army Corps of Engineers, then it's good for them. That's one area we've gone a little bit wider, and we've said we've asked for a 100-foot setback from wetlands because wetlands are so important to biodiversity and land resiliency that we've gone beyond what local jurisdictions have required. It's still less in some cases than what CPW has recommended, but we feel that we've done a pretty good job with protecting resources like that. And another tool, a tool that we just, we're doing more and more work on these last 2 years is regenerative grazing. In the past, we've also called this holistic grazing, but basically this means a departure from traditional grazing where you might have season-long grazing, put the cattle out and they can preferentially graze through the pasture all year long. This can sometimes lead to a decrease in preferred species and an increase in invasive species or unpalatable ones. And so regenerative grazing, generally speaking, works with changing the timing, duration, and intensity of grazing. And also importantly, leaves sufficient rest and recovery periods, sometimes for up to 9 months or even a year. It's sometimes called high density or mob grazing, but it kind of mimics the way that this ecosystem evolved. And what they found is that often leads to higher forage production, and also interestingly, also leads to higher carbon sequestration in the soils. And so two of the other accomplishments for the regenerative grazing efforts is that the state land has been holding these annual education forums. These are the 2 one-day seminars. And this past year, we brought on Bear Creek Ranch. And instead of leasing it out in a traditional manner, we've done a kind of annual prescribed grazing lease where we would actually set the AUMs and dictate how we would like the property to be grazed and then offer that as a bid. And we can do that every year, and that has proved very successful so far. I'd like to add a little component on forest stewardship. We have almost 380,000 acres that are forested state trust land. This is managed through an interagency agreement or lease with the Colorado State Forest Service. In fiscal year 23, the State Forest Service implemented numerous forest health or stewardship projects that involved almost 7,000 acres. And this is outside the State Forest State Plan, the State Forest State Park property. Over 780,000 acres in grant funds are received. Most of these are federal funds, but there are some others as well. These are all administered generally by the Colorado State Forest Service. For each dollar spent, the State Forest Service was able to leverage an additional $3.10 from other sources. And this past year, the board awarded John Twitchell and the Colorado State Forest Service as the recipient of its Outstanding Partner of the Year Award. Just wanted to stop briefly. This is something new that I haven't discussed before. Generally, it's in your board packet, but I haven't presented on it. And that is the temporary access permits. These are access permits that can either last a day or up to 1 year. And we issue as an agency about 258 of these. That's we did in fiscal year 23. That's about 20 a month. But realistically, I would say most of them happen over the summer. And all of these are the different reasons that we may lease them: plant and wildlife surveys. A lot of it is lessee due diligence. They've got to go out to the site. They have contractors go out to do surveying and so forth. Of these, I've called these 3 top categories: wildlife, plant surveys, lessee ecological studies, and education and research. Categorize those as mostly stewardship related. This is the amount that's done by our lessees when we've required a survey. where they're going out to survey for property suitability. And I just put up a couple of these reasons of why the things that were surveyed for some of these, and these include rangeland condition, animal surveys, small and large game, reptiles, amphibians, geological data treatments, tree seed collection. And these are the entities that asked for these and were given temporary access permits. There's state agencies, federal agencies, local nonprofits, statewide nonprofits, and importantly also several universities have asked for access to do research on our lands.
Do they all coordinate through you?
No, very few. Most of them coordinate directly through our district offices.
Okay.
In fiscal year 2023, staff also performed over 1,600 staff inspections. Actually, very few of the pictures of this because they're all out by themselves. And
you need to buy selfie sticks.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how they would take that. But you know, so they're out there either on foot or on ATVs covering a lot of ground. They're doing the bulk of the majority of this monitoring, the inspections. As you know, our property is inspected at least once every 5 years. The addition of the resource specialists have really added to that, and I think added to the overall stewardship of our lands. But the high number actually is often Steve Freeze goes out and does well inspections, and so that includes those well inspections as well. Oops, did I do something wrong?
I don't know.
Almost.
Effort to accelerate.
I just want to talk a little bit about funding stewardship. As you may know, there's in our base budget, we have several funding pots that are used towards stewardship as well. And so, sorry, this black number is, all these total 1.6 million or 628,000. The largest component of this is the Investment and Development Fund. Nick will be talking a little bit about that in the future, just after me. I try to go in and pull out of those large projects what were stewardship related. But it's three that they help us manage land better and get better outcomes in our land. We've included as a stewardship part of that. You can also see the hunting and fishing access program, invasive weeds, ecosystem services and stewardship are smaller components, and land and water. But altogether, I would consider these funds dedicated to stewardship companies. And then just very briefly, I wanted to go over just a few projects. One of these is the Badger Creek Partnership. This property is on the Badger Creek property that I showed you the picture of earlier. And it's for the wet meadow and stream restoration work. The agency has already identified that they will be one of our award recipients for in the December meeting. This is a picture of the Nipple Rim property. This is a very large property up in northern Moffat County. This is now in the Stewardship Trust, and we're now conducting, have started the baseline survey for this property and others that hadn't happened before. There are two properties on state trust lands that participated in the Co-swap Wildfire Mitigation Program. This is administered out of DEP. It's another pot of funding used for wildfire mitigation. But an important component of it is also workforce training. So both they have to involve either the Youth Corps or the Department of Corrections SWIFT crews. Now we've had 2 successful projects last year. We just applied for 2 more for this year. And then finally, staff reviewed potential properties. We reviewed over 15 of those that might make good candidates for a lesser prairie chicken habitat project. And just in closing, I wanted to talk about priorities coming for next year. We're going to be really looking at protecting and enhancing biodiversity with a focus on wetlands and wet meadows. Those are the biological hotspots for the West. You know, water is life. And so the proper functioning of these areas is really key to sound stewardship. Focusing again with regenerative grazing to increase our rangeland productivity and resilience, and also sequester soil carbon. We want to identify and protect cultural resources. We want to carry out our responsible stewardship of those resources, but also allow appropriate use where we can. And finally, I just want to increase staff fluency of these different stewardship tools. We've had quite a number of new staff come on. It's not always easy to understand all these and which tools are appropriate, what they can and cannot do. So that's another goal that I have for those here. And then with that, I just have these 3 questions that I prompted you at the beginning. If there's anything that other information that you'd like to see, any tools that you're aware of that you've heard of going out there that you'd like me to look into. And I just want to give a final shout out to all of the field operations staff and the line of business managers, because they're also very much engaged in stewardship. It's not just the stewardship teams.
Perfect.
Are there any questions?
Yeah.
No, that was great.
I do too. You did great work.
Want to echo what Mindy said. This is half our mission. And when I started here, however many years ago it was, I think we were learning to spell stewardship. And it is now woven so deeply into the work that everybody does. And I'm just really proud of that. I love it when you do this every year, because, I see it in little bitty bits, and to see it collectively and see how much it impacts the organization and what a critical part it plays in what we do is just great. And so thanks for doing this.
I was just thinking on what Ms. Kajin said this morning about migratory, the big game. Do you work with Parks and Wildlife on that part of those combined on a big scale?
We do. Abe Medina actually attends most of those meetings. I know that they're available, and I get all the invitations to them, and we make sure that there's at least one staff member there that's paying attention. So we don't have the migratory, the big, vast sweeps of land like Wyoming does, because of the way, this is what CPW has told me, that the way that we have a range of habitat in close proximity because of the mountains. They'll either migrate up the mountains in the summer and down into the lower valleys in the winter. We don't have a lot of broad sweeping migration patterns across the state. But still, there are migration corridors. And so that's information that CPW keeps as its in its high priority habitat layers. And we take those into consideration in applying stipulations. So
thank you. Appreciate you. All right. I can't read without my glasses. Nick, you're our favorite, and this is our favorite report.
Wait a minute, you just said that to Mindy.
I mean it every time you say it.
Don't have a favorite child.
Well, if you thought that was good, below the doors. Good morning, commissioners. Nick Massey, Assistant Director, here to blast through a financial update on how we did in fiscal 2023, ended in June, and kind of where we think we're headed for 2024 a little bit. I'm a little bit conscious, I'm very conscious of the time this morning, so this may go very fast. Tons of detail in the packet, and if you want to reach out to me with any specific questions, happy to address those as well. So last year, between what we do every day in the permanent fund, we generated $301 million in revenue. That is fantastic and incredible.
Wow.
It cost us about $10 million to do our business last year. And that's between general operating costs and the investments we made in the assets of the trust, which meant that we sent about $174 million to beneficiaries. And that specifically is the school kids of today, and which also means that we sent about 118 million to the permanent fund, which is the school kids of tomorrow. A few details on where the $301 million actually goes. So I mentioned it's about $10 million to run the organization. Again, it's $8 million from our primary appropriation that pays for things like salaries and some projects and general overhead. And then generally, last year we spent $2 million on fixing up, repairing, and expanding some of our assets. Some of it's a mix of I&D funds and some other sources. That $8 million grows about 2.5% per year, which isn't a surprise. That's been sort of prevailing inflation for a long time. We'll see what happens based on recent trends in inflation. Some of our costs are certainly going to go up. And that $2 million in asset investment, that's pretty typical of what we would spend in a year. Anyway. On average, personnel costs make up between 55 and 65% of our yearly total costs, speaking to that $8 million. And it's been growing about 4% a year. That growth comes from some additional staff that we've added over time, as well as the cost of benefits and the opportunities that the state has provided for salary increases based on measuring the prevailing wage for similar jobs across the industries that we compete in, and addressing cost of living over time. Next year, of course, as we've spoken about, we've got a request for 5 FTE in with the legislature. It'll be considered as part of the budgetary process starting in November. And so those numbers are all going to get all messed up. So I won't have trend numbers. Well, it'll be interesting to see the trend numbers due next year. I want to point out that as part of that $8 million, there's those lines that we call non-discretionary. It's where somebody tells us how much we're spending this year. And those make up between 15 and 25% of our annual total on average. There isn't really a growth number there because they ebb and flow with the cost of Attorney General time, the assessments that OIT makes upon us. And I think this year was something around 20%, but usually within that range. And just a reminder that when we conduct our non-simultaneous exchange transactions, the funds that flow in from a disposition or we expend in an acquisition are not really included in any of the numbers that I talked about. They're a separate thing entirely. So in terms of distributions, we best saw $153 million from the school trust last year. That was half of our gross revenue. A late bill that kind of caught me by surprise that took another $10 million from us. And then $18 million in overflow in permanent fund investment income as part of statutory distribution. Over 15 years, we're now at $1.1 billion that we've sent to BEST. Tremendous amount of impact from an organization of 40-something people. Just in terms of context, BEST last year made $110 million in grants over 40-ish projects. And with matching funds, that was about a $200 million impact to local communities and their schools. And since 2009, BEST reports that they've done $2.5 billion in grants. In context, again, that's on a $16 billion-ish problem as we understand it. So big gap to make up. And then school finance gets a part of our, permanent funds investment income to the tune of $21 million a year. And over the same 15-year period, they've seen $520 million. The math isn't direct. There's some times in the past where they got more than 21 million from school trust assets. We got 17,000 acres bigger last year, the school trust did. Some pretty cool acquisitions. Bear Creek Ranch is a very cool opportunity for us it's our laboratory for the annual ag lease program that we've been wanting to do for a while. That Manzanola farm is irrigated agriculture and some water rights. That's always appreciated in the portfolio. And then, big congratulations to Chris Smith and other staff involved in the in lieu transactions. It's a 10-year project, 150-year-old debt. Most of the acreage that we're talking about came from that transaction. I have on the screen the southeast quadrant of the state because, interestingly, those two acquisitions I highlight and a big chunk of in lieu lands are in the southeast quadrant of the state. So the red up there, has us showing up a little bit more frequently in the southeast. So where does that leave us for next year? No tears are shed over a number like $286 million, but it is less than this year. That comes from both our operating income as well as the investment income that we expect the permanent fund to throw off. But $286 million, it's a slight decrease after a couple of exceptional years. There are very few businesses that I've ever been associated with where you see revenue increasing 67% in one year, 23% in another year. But, for the sake of contrast, I put some red up there. A 5% decline comes from me being very conservative in terms of oil and gas. Oil and gas is the biggest chunk of our revenue. When we forecast oil and gas, we look at what's been happening over the last several years, and then we also look to what's happening in the futures markets for the commodity. The best information we've got says that we should expect production to decline a little bit or prices to decline a little bit. In this case, we think production is probably going to be roughly steady and prices will decline a little bit over time. And that drags the overall forecast down a little bit, but still phenomenal money. In terms of, I'd like to be more accurate in the forecasting that we do.
That one's hard.
The gap up there
knowledge
is an interesting little constellation. I have a goal this year to attempt to become more accurate in our forecast and more rapid. There are different parts of the legislature now that are interested in a forecast from us that weren't in the past. Primarily CDE, Department of Ed. They'd like to know what they can count on coming from us. And there's a challenge in getting that put together quickly and accurately. As we look back at revenue over the past decade or so, we see that revenue tends to follow the prevailing price of West Texas crude. That red line overlaid with the graph of the bar up there says, wow, look at that. It's interesting that as West Texas oil changes in price, so does our revenue. No kidding. The challenge then, of course, is saying, well, it's correlated with to a degree. Moving forward, how do we figure it out? And this year, just like every other year, really, but this year, taking into account things like global politics, global economics, the performance of the products locally, regulations locally, internationally. The industry, I sort of shorthanded what's going on in the industry right now is arm wrestling. There's a ton of merger and acquisition activity going on. All those things are a factor in figuring out how much goo is going to come out of the ground and how much people are going to be willing to pay for it. And so I have been very fortunate in that as a board, the board has always been supportive of me being very, very wrong in some years. But as a finance professional, I don't like to be there. So cross your fingers. I think maybe this year the lines will meet. So that is as brief as I can make it. Again, happy to entertain questions on the spot if you want to engage with me individually as well. Happy to. Commissioner Heath. Commissioner Heath, his hand is up.
Yes. Well, first, thank you. That's a very helpful and concise way to describe our situation. I wanted to talk about our 5 staff requests, particularly when our projections are down a little bit. I mean, we've got an excellent staff and we continue to ask them to do more and more and have some big projects planned. But I just want to talk about that request for staff addition and what that means in the long run as we continue to look at decline in oil and gas revenues. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is Assistant Director Okish. I'll start. They're all very strategically targeted into growth areas. So one is intended to support recreation, which has tripled or more revenue over the last several years, and I think can continue in that direction with additional support. And the rest are loosely, well, not loosely, under the heading of biodiversity, and include regenerative grazing, carbon expertise, and all of those businesses where we see, I'll say, the world moving. So I think they're all strategic investments in future revenues that will offset some of the loss of oil and traditional revenue sources.
I'm nodding vigorously because I think they are around carbon storage. And as we know, we're going to need to pivot at some point from oil and gas. I see these as being other revenue generating lines of business for us.
Good. Well, that was
Commissioner Heath, just strictly in terms of numbers, right now, our operating expenses are 2.5% of our operating revenue. And this would probably increase it to about 3% of our operating revenue, maybe not even that much. So it's not a gigantic change in terms of money going out the door for staff, but.
And so are you saying that the additional staff that we're requesting will be involved in the kinds of revenue generation that we will transition to as we anticipate declines in oil and gas?
Yep.
Yes.
Lots of nodding heads. I think it's a nice way to summarize it.
Well, that was a very positive report, so you may be our favorite report. Actually,
I've got one more chance.
And commissioners, in your book are the 3 reports we submit to the legislature every year. Just so.
Yeah, I meant to mention that we are required by statute to provide a couple of reports to the legislature about our activities. Those are part of your packet. We don't require a vote. We just want to make sure that you know what's being submitted on behalf of the board to the legislature. And it's a pretty standard format that we've nailed down over the last 6.5 years.
Terrific. Thank you.
Right, Commissioner, we've got 30 minutes left to get through the business plans. All of the people who are going to talk to you are hearing that, and so we're going to cycle through.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, commissioners, Nick Massey again, for the record, Assistant Director. And I'm going to have the staff come up here in alphabetical order in terms of the business lines.
It's not by first name.
Not by first name.
Okay.
What I think you'll hear this morning is you've got a group of highly skilled, hardworking people who are bringing upbeat messages about the opportunities to grow and innovate our business in the coming year and coming years. Lots of great news about things that happened this year. And whereas oil and gas kind of dominates the conversation when we talk about money coming in the door, I think there's a nice balance here in terms of these business lines that reflect everything that we're doing every day. So with that, I'm actually going to get out of the way entirely. And Edie, you want to come up and start us off?
Good morning, I'm Cindy Gotsagen, Conservation Services Manager, to give a very brief review of the Ecosystem Services business program. I just want to highlight or bring your attention to 3 accomplishments. One of those is that the State Land Board now has its 3rd active mitigation bank. It's our 2nd wetland mitigation bank. We also completed a thorough review of our Ecosystem Services program this past year. We hired an organization called Creek Bank Associates. And what they told us is that we've done a great job developing our bank. Our Ecosystem Services business program, they recommended a couple of tweaks in terms of how we would structure our production leases. And they basically said it's time to now get into the voluntary market, so we're poised to do that. And finally, I was able to present at the National Mitigation and Banking Conference this past year, and we're way out ahead of other states and other organizations in terms of developing mitigation banking on state or just on public. Excuse me. Are there any questions that you have for me?
I just real quickly, that big check you got last year from, is that into that bank, or is that,
No, we're still getting money from the bank. So that was the Prebbles Meadow Jumping Mouse Bank. Yep. And so they sold about half of their credits, and we're looking to still get revenue from the rest of it.
Thanks, Cindy.
Cindy, William, and then Katie.
Good clap for everyone. So
good morning, Commissioners. William Woolston, Field Operations Team Leader. Happy to give you a quick highlight of our field operations business readout. I know the first thing I want to mention is the Bear Creek Ranch that we did sign the first annual grazing lease on. Very happy to finally have that in play. It's gone well. I will mention Abe also has a very good direct lease on that program. We've learned a lot. We had about 18 people come look at the lease. We had 10 good applications. A lot of new people who have not approached the land board before, a couple of young producers, and we have a good first lessee, and we're looking forward to going on with that project in the future. The other thing, the next highlight I'd like to mention is the Manzanola irrigated lease that the acquisition and then leased last year. We have 2 fantastic lessees that we ended up with through a competitive bid process on the lease. And I wish you all could have seen the lease when we purchased it. and the lease a few weeks after those lessees were on site. They, especially one side needed more work. He changed the diversion point out of the ditch. He added land to the irrigated portion of the parcel in that process, increased the efficiency of the ability to irrigate the land. He's just doing a fantastic job. And in the next year, he's going to clean up and add more land, to more irrigated land. So that's just added benefit to that parcel and the running of that parcel. It's been a really fun project to watch. And kudos to Mariah and Eric Van Dyke, or Mariah Pillmore and Eric Van Dyke, for doing a great job with that lease. The other highlight I'd like to, and I'll expedite this because I know we need to, but in the last year or so, we've hired 5 new people, new staff to the field operations. So a third of our field staff essentially came on in the last year or so. One of those, Mariah Pillmore, came. She was with us as a resource specialist. She's now a district manager and doing a fabulous job in a very busy district in South Central. And Eric Van Dyke is our other district manager in the Southeast. He comes on, he knows adaptive grazing management, he knows dryland and irrigated cropland, and is doing a fabulous job down there. 3 resource specialists, again, who bring a lot of expertise: production agriculture, adaptive grazing management, ranch management backgrounds, and extension. And the latest one, Tom Lacka, has been with us for a month. Jess Price has been with us for a few months, and Cooper Carlson's been with us for about a year and a half. But I can't tell you how proud I am of the new group and of the field staff group in general. And I want you to know you have a very competent professional staff out there across the state serving you. And as I said, I couldn't be prouder of what they're doing and how we're positioned to go forward in the next few years with this group. So with that, I will say thank you. And
thank you. I like it.
Thank you.
Thanks, William.
Katie, then Chris.
Morning, commissioners. Katie Stitt, Oil and Gas Leasing Manager. And I'll just do a couple of highlights about the oil and gas business line. Obviously, the biggest highlight is it was our, we had a record revenue year last year, but a lot of different things build into that. So I just wanted to highlight some of those. After 7 years, staff completed our conversion of one of our long-term minerals non-development leases into a no-service occupancy agreement. That allowed us to put some land out for lease through auction and generate $1.5 million in bonus revenues that help benefit the beneficiaries that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. So it was a nice result from a lot of work by several different people. The operator for that particular parcel had a development plan in place, and it helps us develop those resources with minimizing the surface disturbances, and also somebody who was already in line with the state regulations on how to develop in the best way possible for the different challenges in that area. Staff has been doing a lot of behind the scenes work in how we're looking at different leases and taking advantage of opportunities where possible to make sure we're being the most efficient with how we're managing our leases. So I want to give a shout out to Steve Freeze. He's really been doing a lot of work to make sure that acres that we have out to lease are in production and making money for us. So through his efforts, he was able to return 20,000 acres to production this year, which is a pretty substantial number of acres that we were able to get back into production. And it's also good because the longer equipment sits out on site unused, the more possibility there is for problems, environmental hazards. So getting everything back up and running is a great outcome for that use of staff time. We also were able to do a couple of things related to the business plan. We got that updated this year, and that will help guide us into how we're making leasing decisions and targeting different projects based off of what the market is doing currently, and also being able to be responsive to the changing regulatory environment that surrounds oil and gas. So we're excited that that business plan got updated this year. And finally, I just wanted to really recognize the efforts of the team related to the oil and gas business line. I get to sit up here and talk to you, but I'm just one face. We have a great group of people in our finance team that contribute to the day-to-day management of this. Heather Bradshaw, Polly, Veronica, our auditor, Marina, Lindsay, all put a lot of time into making sure that we're getting paid appropriately and that the checks are processed and everybody gets moved to where they need to go. Steve Freeze, in addition to looking at some of our production shut-in related issues, is also doing still all of our surface inspections. So if he's not at his desk, he's out in the state doing work. Crystal Caranda, Minerals Director, does a lot of policy reviews and making sure that we're staying on top of a lot of the local issues that pop up, as well as statewide issues. So there's a great group of people that do a lot of work to make sure that the oil and gas business line stays successful and that we're doing things to contribute to production in the safest and cost and all. So.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate the team. Absolutely.
Yeah. Go oil and gas.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christopher Smith, the Real Estate Section Manager. So the Real Estate Section Business Plan readout is composed of sort of two different sides. One is our commercial real estate portfolio, and one is all the acquisitions and dispositions that the board does that include everything from commercial real estate to ranches to water rights, things like that. Julie Majors runs our commercial real estate portfolio, and Matt LaFontaine runs all of our acquisitions and dispositions. The couple things I'd like to bring to your attention is in the commercial portfolio, our revenue and our occupancy are both down slightly, about 3% each. And that's really no surprise. We presented this to you when we did our business plan update in April when we toured all the properties. This is largely because we're mostly office and there's a trend towards work from home. So you guys got to see all the properties in April. And then some other things to point out is in this last year, we did $40 million worth of transactions. So that's just kind of a huge amount. It's a little bit more than we do annually. We typically do about 35 million. And some of those transactions you've heard about. The Bear Creek Ranch we purchased that really met one of our major strategic goals to do annual grazing leasing, which has now been implemented by field operations. And then we sold about 500 acres to Boulder County Open Space. This is a project we've been working on for about 5 to 7 years. And then two other large accomplishments in the real estate section are the in lieu, which you've heard about. We've settled 15,000 of the 17,000 acres owed. So close. We expect to get the remaining 2,000 acres by the end of this calendar year. So, and lastly, we have really dove into the affordable housing world. We received our first payment on the 103 unit apartment complex down the street here, which we toured, I guess, back last November. And then we're currently working on a couple RFPs for our Night and Grant property and for our Dow Jones property. So, those are the highlights. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
It's great work.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Absolutely.
Yeah. No question.
We have to do this more. Good to see Abe.
Good morning, Commissioners. Abe Medina, Recreation Program Manager. Presenting on the outdoor recreation business plan readout. A couple items that I just want to highlight from the report. Last year was again another record year for the program, even considering the loss of recreation revenue that the program experienced, the loss of our Boulder County properties that Chris just mentioned. However, I attribute this continued success largely to our process that we have in place, our outdoor recreation leasing process, which does allow multiple applicants, including our agricultural lessees, the opportunity to lease recreation rights on our properties. When we have multiple applications on a single property, our process allows us to use an auction to award the lease. This competitive process has been in place since 2016, and it's proven to be both fair and transparent, and has resulted in us achieving market-based rents on our recreation leases. Prior to this process being implemented, it was difficult for us to set recreation leasing rates on individual properties. And we often did find ourselves taking much lower than a property's true values. Our process has allowed us to better understand our own land, identify property characteristics that lead to higher leasing rates. Some of these include attributes such as the quality of big game species found on the property, a mix of forest and grassland, geographic proximity to tourism or high recreation use areas, etc. You'll notice that on the business plan readout that on lands leased for our competitive process, we and this is for properties where we have multiple applications and awarded through an auction. The average lease rate for fiscal year 22-23 was $8.71 per acre per year, which is quite a bit higher than our minimum rate that we would accept on an application of $2. And it's now $2.60, but it was $2.25 per acre per year. The other item that I want to point out on the business plan readout is just regarding outreach and business development. For the last 12 months, I have had the opportunity to participate in the Colorado Tourism Leadership Journey Program. It's a leadership program facilitated by the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade. The intent of the class is to build leadership skills, create a team, problem solving, and develop relationships and networking within the outdoor recreation and tourism industry. You're probably not surprised, they're very much interrelated to each other in the state, and it is an industry that contributes a tremendous amount of money to Colorado's economy. It's a great program. Most value I think it has for this business line is just the networking opportunities that I gained through participating and meeting the other folks in the program. So I welcome any questions.
You didn't mention that you won the COSA award, but that was a really big deal this year too.
Yes.
So congratulations to
thank you.
You and all the team that made that happen.
We received last week an award at the Colorado Space Alliance Conference in Snowmass for our project that we worked on with San Luis Valley Great Outdoors in Saguache County. We did, in partnership, some cabins on the property, helped them achieve some revenue goals that they're using their proceeds from the rental on these 6 cabins they placed to help fund their trail building crew in the county or regionally within the area. And the lease helps us also mitigate or have a little bit better control, eyes on the ground to control dispersed and camping and unauthorized use on the property, which was resulting in some damage to natural resources.
Thanks, Abe. Thanks, Abe.
Morning, Commissioners. Dave Grovenberg, Renewable Energy Program Manager. Like my fellow coworkers, I just wanted to mention a few highlights to the program, the business plan readout. The key one is the revenue. We increased our revenue significantly this year, bounced back from last year's shortfall. And we didn't quite meet our goal, but just by a few thousand. We expect that that revenue to continue to increase. Part of the reason for that increase was 23 newly executed leases, mostly planning leases, but a few production leases, as well as NextEra's Thunderwood project finally going into production in July of this year, which was finally seeing that production revenue. Like I mentioned, we plan on that continuing with more planning lease executions over the next couple of years, as well as we expect to see some planning leases turn over to production leases. A few key projects that are looking pretty promising are several from NextEra, one called Dusty Roads Wind up in Kit Carson County, another one called Adams Wind with NextEra. Both of those are looking very promising, and as well as Mirasol, which is just east of the Thunderwood project, this utility scale solar project, about the same size. It's not 100% on state trust land, but it's quite a few acres of it is on state trust land. And then there's another project with a company called AES. The developing company is Rocky Mountain Solar, which is just southeast of Thunderwood. It's another large scale project, and they're actually at their Pueblo county hearing today, asking for the permit. So all those look pretty promising. There's probably others as well, but those are a couple of the key ones. A couple things I wanted to mention regarding key goals moving forward that we're working on. We're working with a company called Landgate, which is similar to EnergyNet that the oil and gas folks use to market our lands. We're going to experiment with that with some parcels in Pueblo County, about 5 or 6 parcels that are going through our line of business review. Then we'll advertise that. I'm aware of a couple developers that are definitely interested in those properties, and we'll probably see several more. And the whole purpose of that is to maximize our planning lease revenue and our production lease revenue. The other key thing I wanted to mention regarding the business plan, key goals moving forward, is we have about 4 developers that are very interested in incorporating agrivoltaics into their projects, mostly sheep grazing rather than vegetables or agricultural farming beyond that. But they're very interested in it. So when those planning leases move towards production, hopefully one or all of them, it will incorporate some agrivoltaic features to it. And that's all I have for renewables.
Super cool. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
For power sites real quick.
Definitely.
David Rodenberg, Power Site Program Manager.
Going up the alphabetical order.
Regarding tower sites, a couple things I just wanted to mention. As you probably noticed on that business plan, there was quite a significant shortfall in revenue, but that was related to uncollected rent, which we fully expect to receive and collect. Still, there's some misunderstanding and communication regarding some of the lease rates and the nuances of the lease, but we expect to see that revenue. Even with that revenue, we still would have been short of our goal, but we would have been higher than last year's revenue by a small amount. We feel that's pretty good considering the amount of staff time that's dedicated to that program. And then lastly, key goals moving forward, as we discussed in our business plan, the bigger discussion we had a few months ago, staff is working on trying to determine whether or not the program deserves any more resources, whether there's enough revenue potential there. And we're doing more research on that and working with the industry leaders to determine that.
Thank you.
A little, yeah, like
whole different line of business.
All right. Good morning, I suppose. Good morning, Commissioners. Ben Teschner, Solid Minerals Manager. I'll highlight a couple of quick things about our Solid Minerals program. The first of which is that the top headline on that is Solid Minerals, but really buried in this business line at the moment are 3 separate business lines. Our traditional Solid Minerals program, which is broken into coal and non-coal, and the top line number you see there is non-coal, even though coal at this moment still accounts for more revenue than our non-coal solid mineral assets, or solid mineral revenue, excuse me. Also in this business line is geothermal, and then geologic carbon sequestration as well. And so if you read the fine print, so to speak, you can get a little more information on those business lines. We did our solid minerals business plan update this year, and this is a traditional business line that's in a period of evolution. We're moving away and sunsetting coal-fired power plants in this state, and the coal-fired power plants that are fed by our coal mines are set to sunset in the 2028, 2030 range, and we anticipate that our coal mines will sunset along with them. And so we're preparing for that, and in part helping transition this line away from coal and toward metals that we need for our new energy economy, and especially electrification, and the construction materials, sand, gravel, stone, limestone, cement, that we need as a state and neighboring states need for the growth of especially our urban areas. Our non-coal revenue, which is the top line we report in this business line, exceeded $3 million this year for the first time, certainly in my tenure, and I think in recent memory. But it's important to note that 900,000 of this was an advanced minimum royalty surrender. And what's important to understand about this is that these surrenders this was collected over the last decade, these revenues, but they don't hit and become part of our revenue reporting until either they are spent in the form of production royalties and converted to a production royalty, or the lessee abandons the property, abandons the project, and then we get to kind of keep it and record it as revenue. This case was the Hitchrack Ranch quarry that never was. And this is a great example of why we put advanced minimum royalties in our leasing, to ensure that we receive a reasonable revenue and reasonable returns from particularly these large leases, even if they don't get off the ground. And then the final thing I want to highlight is that we're really excited that we have grown the geologic carbon sequestration business line into one that is likely to be a standalone business line here going forward. The revenue from that was over $100,000 in the fiscal year we're reporting on now. And next year, I'm excited to report that it's going to be something in the neighborhood of $750,000. So we're seeing some rapid growth in that business line. And we haven't even put carbon into the ground yet. So stand by for that. Happy to take questions or just move on to all that.
Terrific, thank you.
We're gonna figure out how to carbonate water. All right, I'm back.
Have we not done that? What are those things in the cans I drink?
For the record, Justin Gary, water program manager. I'll go as quick as I can. We're running out of time. So this was the first year for me and the water program. It's been interesting, learned a lot. Coming from a regulatory background, the business side, the contractual side has been interesting and enjoyable and challenging and everything that it is. I've learned a lot, basically. We'll just say that. Something that has continually come up through this year is maintenance of infrastructure. We've been discovering a variety of dams on a lot of our properties that they need maintenance, and it's expensive. Fortunately, we can continue to operate. There's really no safety risks, but maintenance on dams is very expensive. So that'll be addressed over time, probably with I&D funds, something like that. Looking forward to this coming year, I'm going to be spending a lot of time with Lowry, as we discussed today. That was one fraction of the water situation out at Lowry. Also, Chico is going to take quite a bit of time. With however things play out, there's a variety of water assets out at Chico that they need, not just the infrastructure, but the water rights and the water administration on the Chico. And I think I'll just stop there. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Josie, we can see your hand up.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you. This is actually a question for Ben, in that I noticed in two of the lines of business that you are projecting, those are scheduled for regulatory development. And do you think that will have impact? I know that the oil and gas producers, when that came on board, really felt like they had a setback in the year that those regulations were developed. I mean, what's your sense in how that might impact your plans in these two areas of the sequestration and also the geothermal?
I think that remains to be seen. I'm hopeful that in both cases that the regulation provides more clarity and certainty around these for these types of projects. I think it remains to be seen whether that is the case or whether industry views it as overly burdensome. I can't really speak to which way we're going to fall here.
And are you having a role in partnering with them as those regulations are developed?
Yes, so we've had the opportunity to meet with a number of the folks, particularly at ECMC and
the Colorado Energy Office.
Colorado Energy Office, thank you, who are working on these regulatory frameworks, and we've had the opportunity to submit our comments, which I think have been well received.
Commissioner Heath, I want to take a slightly more optimistic spin than Ben did, but it strikes me that, nobody's going to inject carbon into the ground until they're clear who has the long-term liability, who owns the pore space, how that's going to get, those issues have to get dealt with before the real dollars start to flow. I think the planning leases are nice, but the money's going to come from the injection. And if I were an operator, I actually wouldn't inject until I understood who had the long-term liability and what my future obligations might be. So I think some of the regulatory frameworks designed to address those issues, which will give more certainty to operators to actually do the business.
Yeah. Very good. And we neglected to applaud Justin.
Raise our water glasses.
Yeah, to Justin. There we go. Yeah, cheers, Justin. Thanks. I think that's it for the business plans. Commissioner Heath, sorry, we'll take questions.
Oh, no.
We're 1 minute over, but I wanted to get to the staff report, our last item in our agenda. Two things that I wanted to call your attention to. First was Chico Basin Ranch. As you know, that's all moving to November. And the second was the NSE proceeds. We talked back in June when we talked about the whole trust, about ways to do asset allocation differently, and perhaps we would have opportunities to drive more money toward the permanent fund. And it was a little bit theoretical when we had the discussion. It's about to become reality. Matt LaFontaine is going to close on a couple of transactions here this month that are going to generate nearly 50 million. With that in front of us and those dollars flowing in, and being cognizant of not wanting to be seen with a lot of money just sort of sitting around and not at work yet, I was going to come back to you all with a board order that maybe says some of that feels excessive to have in our NSC account, and we ought to direct it to the permanent fund now rather than waiting 2 years. I
would heartily endorse that. Okay. It makes good sense.
Commissioner Heath, any questions on that?
No.
Okay, great. Okay. Did you all have any question about anything else we talked about in this time?
No, that was an excellent example of speed dating.
And just to be
yeah, exactly.
The November meeting is set for Wednesday, November 8th. I think Rachel's made the adjustments in all your calendars. Okay. I hope she has. And that'll be a long day. I'm going to reach out to the other two commissioners and do everything I can to have 5 for 5 commissioners next month when we have Chico Basin, and perhaps bring back the water issue. Okay, that's all I've got.
Wonderful. And you get to go on your trip.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you all for working on the schedule this morning.
Amazing.
Yeah, very good. Good work. Thank you. Appreciate it, everyone.
Need to adjourn?
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.
I'm just making sure I'm making
that.
Recording
Recording stopped.